When are you going to blow up the city and burn it again? Only when you have no place to hide will we enter the city. Not only that, along the way, the Bangra generals who resisted the five-star army were all skinned alive and wrapped in grass. No matter if it was a dead general or a living general, it was the same. In this battle, the five-star army had shown their cruel side, completely changing the image of the Han people in the eyes of others. They were magnanimous and kind. Yang Qindong never showed mercy to his enemies. Yang Qindong always said to everyone that if one repaid evil with good, how would one repay good? If you are not kind, I will not be righteous. If you can do it on the first day, I will do it on the 15th day. In the end, let's see who is afraid. The kindness of the Han people had always been given to those who had the intention to correct their mistakes and were kind-hearted. As for those kind and black-hearted jackals, forget it. Against them, Yang Qindong had plenty of hunting rifles in his hands. Regarding Yang Qindong's decision, none of the generals in the army objected. Firstly, they were used to seeing life and death, and knew that being kind to the enemy was being cruel to oneself. They knew that if the enemy was not eliminated, it would be harmful to oneself. Secondly, this time, it was Bangra who attacked Myanmar first, so it was time to teach them a lesson. It was like when someone punched you, but because of the limited strength, the punch did not kill you. Now that it was your turn, of course, you had to use as much strength as you could. Thirdly, which was also the most important point, everyone trusted Yang Qindong. Over the years, his position and authority in the army was unchallenged. His words were like the truth, and everyone was used to obeying. With the above 3 points, Yang Qindong's orders were naturally carried out with all their might. However, just because the army did not have any objections, it did not mean that the civil officials did not have any opinions. For some reason, this matter spread to Chichen City, as well as some other provinces under Yang Xie's control. It attracted the opposition of some officials and a few scholars. In their view, the Han people were the masters of the world. Since that was the case, they should have a tolerant attitude towards their friends. Especially those who had not been enlightened, they should be more reasonable. Once they knew the etiquette, they would not go against the Han army. What's more, this time, it was April who was assassinated first. As his subjects, it was normal for them to retaliate. These rumors were also gathered by the intelligence department and reported to Yang Qindong. This made Beta Persei, who was on the side, curse on the spot. These scholars to think that they keep talking about those who know the truth and the sage's principles. Don't they even know right from wrong? That bullshit King Abu was not killed by us at all. He was about to surrender. How could we kill him? It was obvious that someone was trying to frame him. How can these people be the accomplices of a villain? Yang Qindong agreed with Beta Persei's words. It was impossible to say that he was not angry. He was fighting and killing on the front lines, risking his life at all times to bring glory to the Han people and let them live a good life. Now, they had taken advantage of him and were still acting obedient. What magnanimity, they really did not know fear. With anger in his heart, he curiously looked at the list of names from the intelligence department. He wanted to see who was on it and who he was familiar with. Not to mention the list, he really saw a few familiar faces. For example, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs, Dong Chuanfu, and the Deputy Director of the Ministry of Grain, Yan Lianshui. These two people, because their positions were not low and their positions were very important, their names left some impression in Yang Qindong's heart. As for the others, he didn't care. They were just some unknown names that couldn't arouse his interest in the slightest. The list also recorded some of their opinions. The most important thing was that they were the Celestial Empire and were a country of etiquette, so they should help some small countries. How could the army do such a cruel thing? Yang Qindong only laughed coldly at this. In his eyes, these people were not real scholars. From Yang Qindong's point of view, a true scholar was not only a scholar who could write essays and recite poems, but also a person whose essays were creative and thoughtful. Moreover, they were also people who had humanistic feelings and social sciences. Moreover, real scholars were people who were the most serious, full of a sense of justice, and who cherished their own reputation the most. Jumping out like a group of jumping clowns, belittling others to elevate themselves, pretending to be virtuous, fishing for compliments, and looking down on others, such people could not be called scholars. They could only be called a group of arrogant and shameless pseudo-scholars. Chapter 1553. Thinking about it, they were quite pitiful because they had low self-esteem, were reclusive, and were not accepted by the world. They could only use such claptrap and lowly methods to attract the public's attention. If it was just to attract the public's attention, Yang Qindong was not willing to comment on it. He had a lot of things to do in a day, and there were also a lot of things that needed to be decided by him. He did not have the time and energy to pay attention to these people who did not have a strong sense of existence. However, they should not have attacked the military. This touched Yang Qindong's bottom line. Yang Qindong's way of ruling the country was not complicated. It could even be said that it was somewhat simple. In order to better manage the areas under his rule, he would give the civil officials great power. He only needed to divide the work. As for the more detailed work, he would let the people under him do it. He only needed to wait and see the results. If the results were good, he would continue to use them. If the results were not good, or if it proved that the person was not capable, he would just replace them. Sometimes he would even indulge the civil officials. This was a form of respect for them and also a strategy to manage the country. After all, the civil officials were important. As long as they were given what they needed, these people would work hard for him. This could solve many of the troubles of a monarch. He could indulge the civil officials, but there was one thing that no one could touch. Even if it was an important official or an indispensable existence in the eyes of others, it was still not allowed. This matter was related to the transfer of military authority in the army. Looking at the history of the dynasties, the reason why the founding monarchs were always at the same level was because they enjoyed the supreme ability to transfer military power. In the later years of the dynasty, due to various needs of balance, the monarchs had to give up military power and began to play all kinds of tricks with the civil officials. By doing so, it seemed that they could hold great power and know everything about the country. However, if they neglected the importance of military power, the final result was that the civil officials could control the military. Once they met a strong opponent, they would not even have the power to fight back. Moreover, a monarch who did not hold military power could not gain the respect of his subjects. After all, if he did not have any means to intimidate them, why should they be afraid of him? Yang Qindong, who understood this principle and saw through its essence, firmly grasped the military power in his hands. In this way, he had the power to change the situation at any time, hanging a sword of Damocles over the heads of the civil officials. As such, they had no choice but to obey. Not only did Yang Qindong do this, but his descendants also had to do this in the future. In this way, they would not have to worry about the collapse of the country. Even if something irreversible happened, at least they would have the ability to protect themselves. With such understanding and deep thinking, how could Yang Qindong change his decision just because of the clamor of some scholars? Since the policy had been set, it would not be easily changed. Not only that, Yang Qindong did not intend to let go of those scholars who were clamoring and picking on him, not to mention that he was a person who would not rub sand in his eyes, but he was still able to distinguish between right and wrong. What? You're eating my salary and living in the house that I built. How dare you come back and criticize me? With Yang Chendong's authority and influence in Yangxia, they were already so presumptuous. It could be imagined that if his descendants were in this position, they would be even more rampant, right? If it was a more cowardly heir, wouldn't he be eaten by these so-called scholars? If he did not find something for these people to do, and let them know that the horse lord had 3 eyes, he was afraid that such things would only happen more and more in the future. Beta Persei send a telegram to City Lord Yuqian and Yang Wu, pick out the people on the list, and let them form a temporary diplomatic group. Allow them to go to the camp of the king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huiyin. Also, tell them that I can do as they say without using a sword or a spear. Then I need them to influence the king of the 3 provinces and let them urge and force Zhu Huiyin to surrender unconditionally immediately. Otherwise, no one can guarantee what the consequences will be. Beta Persei took notes with a pen at the side, but as he wrote, he laughed out loud. This was clearly a means for the young master to deal with these scholars. It was simply impossible to make the other party surrender unconditionally. The king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huiyin, who had hundreds of thousands of soldiers, was not the kind of person who would wait for death. If he was, he would not have harmed his eldest brother and 3rd brother to seize power. However, in Beta Persei's view, this was a good thing. Who asked those scholars to criticize the army when they had nothing better to do? Did they really think that they were in the Ming dynasty? Did they really think that they were those imperial censors who could make a rumor about anything, and even if there was an accident, they would not be blamed for it? Now, I'm asking you to negotiate with Zhu Huiyin, the person who killed his brother. If you have anything to say, you can say it to him. But remember to be careful. Don't provoke the other party and end up angering him. If that happens, even the gods won't be able to save you. When Beta Persei was trying hard to hold back his laughter, Yang Chendong spoke again. Send a telegram to Deputy City Lord Luan Shaochen. Tell him to keep an eye on this matter. If anyone on this list dares to not go, they will be stripped of their official position and will never be employed again. Their descendants will also not be able to be officials for 3 generations. Yang Chendong was worried that these people would play tricks when they saw the real move, so he came up with such a punishment system. Don't underestimate these so-called scholars who boasted of being virtuous and virtuous. Pick out one of them and put them in the future. They would all be at the level of emperors. Especially when it came to pretending to be dead, they were all top-notch experts. If they didn't set some bottom lines, they would really come up with all kinds of tricks. The telegram flew straight to Crimson City and soon appeared on the desk of the City Lord of Crimson City, Yu Qian. Not only that, but Deputy City Lord Luan Shaochen and Yang Wu of the Yang family also received the same telegram. The telegram was made public and had no intention of keeping it a secret. In just half a day, the news had spread everywhere. Dong Chuanfu, who was named in the telegram, had a gloomy expression on his face. In his office, Yan Lianshui, the deputy director of the grain department, was crying and complaining with tears and snot running down his face. Elder Dong, they clearly don't see eye to eye with us. They think we're talking too much and want to make an example out of us. As our leader, you must speak out against it. I don't want to face the king of the 3 provinces. I heard that this person even killed his brothers. He's a demon king. Yan Lianshui fully displayed his acting skills as an award-winning actor. His face was full of pitiful, and tears flowed freely from his eyes. Those who didn't know would think that he had suffered a great grievance. When he said this, Dong Chuanfu's face became even uglier. What did he mean by being the leader? He wasn't going to take the blame for this. Thus, he said coldly, Deputy Director Yan, pay attention to your status. This matter was voluntary from the beginning to the end. No one forced anyone, let alone being the leader. After this reminder, Lin Shui realized that he had said something wrong and quickly corrected himself. Yes, Elder Dong is right. We were willing. However, our intentions were good. We didn't want to see the 5-star army brutally kill people. There's nothing wrong with this. Now, you want us, the civil officials, to persuade the king of the 3 provinces to surrender? This is an impossible task. Perhaps we won't be able to return. Elder Dong, you are someone whose city lord you personally wrote a letter to invite. You have a lot of face, so you must report this matter truthfully. Humph, this time, Dong Chuanfu didn't say anything to refuse. He was indeed summoned by Yu Qian from the southern Ming dynasty. At that time, he was just an unsuccessful 7th-rank imperial censor in the southern Ming dynasty. He was getting older and older, and was about to die. At this time, Yu Qian sent someone to deliver a letter to him. He thought about the current situation, and saw that Bugnam of Gojoseon was going to replace the Great Ming dynasty. Thus, he made the decision to join the Southern Ming dynasty and become the deputy chief. In reality, it wasn't just Dong Chuanfu. In the entire Yangxie dynasty, there were many people like him. They were all invited by Yu Qian or their colleagues who had been officials in the Great Ming dynasty. However, these people had a common characteristic. Whether it was in the Southern Ming dynasty or in Beiming, they were the type of people who weren't used in important positions. Otherwise, they wouldn't have abandoned their families and come to the Yangxie dynasty. After all, in the eyes of many people, the Great Ming dynasty was the orthodox. Dong Chuanfu, who was personally invited by Yu Qian, was very proud of himself. Relying on this, even the head of the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs, his immediate superior, was rarely in his eyes. Now that something had happened, he naturally had to ask Yu Qian for help. All right, I'll go look for City Lord Yu now. All of you just stay here quietly and don't say anything that goes too far. Dong Chuanfu stood up from behind the desk and tidied up his clothes. Under Lin Shui's admiring gaze, he walked out of the office. The main responsibility of the Ethnic Affairs Department was to adjust the conflicts between the various ethnic groups in order to achieve harmony. In the end, they would eliminate the barriers and become one family. Just from this point alone, it was a very important department. When Yu Qian recommended Dong Chuanfu for the position of deputy minister, he had high hopes. He believed that with this person's ability, he would be able to do things well. Therefore, as someone who was valued by Yu Qian, Dong Chuanfu didn't need to make an appointment to see the city lord. When the staff of the city lord's manor saw Dong Chuanfu appear, they first greeted him with a smile. Then, with the excuse that the city lord was still busy and needed to wait for a while, they invited him to a nearby lounge. Dong Chuanfu didn't think too much at first, but after staying for more than 2 hours, his expression became a bit ugly. In particular, he hadn't seen anyone pour tea for him in such a long time. How could he not know that he was being ignored? Chapter 1554. Thinking about it, he was just called by Yang Qindong. Although on the surface it was said that he was entrusted with an important task, anyone with a clear mind could see that there was clearly a problem. At this time, who wouldn't stay away from him? How could anyone take the initiative to approach him? This was the official scene. When he was proud, he was surrounded by flowers. When he was frustrated, he was surrounded by holes. Sigh. After a sigh, Dong Chuanfu knew that his situation was a bit dangerous, but the more it was like this, the more he had to find Yu Qian and argue with him. Otherwise, he would really be finished. He got up, strode out of the lounge, and went straight to the floor of the City Lord mansion. During this period, although there were staff members stopping him, he really ignored them until he pushed the door upstairs. He didn't even knock on the door, which was enough to show the anger in Dong Chuanfu's heart now. When he pushed the door in, he saw Yu Qian wearing a pair of reading glasses and looking down at something. When the two looked at each other, Yu Qian showed a puzzled look. Inghai, why are you here? Inghai was Dong Chuanfu's name. Usually, only familiar people would call him like this. When Dong Chuanfu saw Yu Qian's stunned expression, he knew that the people below must not have reported his arrival. Thinking that it was not that Yu Qian didn't want to see him, the anger in his heart also subsided a lot. However, the staff behind him, seeing Dong Chuanfu break into the city lord's office without any etiquette, couldn't help but show a helpless look on his face. He seemed to want to explain something to Yu Qian. These staff members of the city lord mansion had long been convinced by Yu Qian's feelings and work attitude for the country. This time, they also knew that Dong Chuanfu came to ask for help. In order to reduce some pressure on Yu Qian, they acted on their own initiative and didn't want to arrange a meeting. Who was Yu Qian? His brain was very flexible. No one said anything, just the situation in front of him. He guessed most of it. He also knew that the staff members were doing this for his own good, but since he was here, he couldn't just kick him out. He had to see him anyway, so he waved his hand and said to the staff members, "You can leave. I will have a good chat with Inghai." The staff had no choice but to withdraw, but there were still some discerning people who went to the office of the deputy city lord, Wan Shaochen, on the lower floor. After the office door was closed, Yu Qian stood up and personally poured a cup of tea for Dong Chuanfu. Then he sat down on the sofa in the reception area. "Inghai, you already know?" In public, Dong Chuanfu raised his head and wanted to say something. However, Yu Qian waved his hand and said, "Inghai, you were too reckless this time. You don't know what happened at all. You just listened and believed some things that you shouldn't have said. Now that the king is angry, the consequences are very serious." Since Yu Qian had spoken such serious words, Dong Chuanfu's face immediately fell. He just wanted to make his presence known and increase his fame and influence. One had to know that he had often used this method in the Great Ming and Southern Ming dynasty. Usually, you would only be promoted if you had enough influence. Then, you would have a smooth career path. However, he never expected that the same method would lead to such a disaster in Yangxia. It would be a lie to say that Dong Chuanfu didn't regret it. Therefore, he opened his mouth and said, "In public, I know my mistake. Please save me." Sigh. Yu Qian, who had always taken good care of his colleagues, shook his head helplessly. This time, when such a thing happened, Yang Qindong didn't send a telegram to the city lord's residence to deal with it. Instead, he directly explained the way to deal with it. Moreover, he also informed Yang Wu and Luan Shaochen. This made it impossible for him, the city lord, to say anything. Who was Yang Wu? He was one of the 5 generals of the Yang family. The entire Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace's security was in his hands. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that when Yang Qindong wasn't in Qiqian City, all the people who were loyal to Yang Xia had to listen to him. Sometimes his words were even more effective than the city lord's residence. Who was Wan Shaochen? He wasn't just Yang Qindong's brother-in-law. He was also a 2-time provincial governor and had more than 10 years of experience in governing a place. His ability wasn't inferior to Yu Qian's. If it wasn't for the fact that he was still young and didn't have enough experience, he might even be able to replace Yu Qian's position as the city lord. Even so, Luan Shaochen was seen as the most popular candidate to succeed Yu Qian. Once Yu Qian was old and had to retire, it would be time for this person to take over. It was to the point that some of the young staff in the city lord's residence looked to him as their leader. With the help of these 2 people, Yu Qian didn't have much room to maneuver. In addition, he was also leaning towards Yang Qindong's decision. What happened at the front, most people at the back only had a rough idea. However, for someone with a high position like him, he naturally knew a lot more details. Someone killed King Abdul of Bangla and framed the five-star army for it. In the following battle, the entire country retaliated, which caused Yang Qindong to be angry. He also didn't want his soldiers to be hurt by hidden arrows, which was why he carried out such a cruel massacre. In the end, this was a military strategy. Everyone wanted to obtain the most benefits with the least losses. It wasn't clear who was right or wrong, but now someone actually went to command the five-star army and blamed Yang Qindong. And the person who blamed was Yang Xie's subordinate. It would be strange if Bugnam of Gojoseon wasn't angry, since he knew the cause and effect of this matter. Whether it was for public or private reasons, Yu Qian wouldn't stop this matter. If the person involved wasn't Dong Chuanfu, who he had worked hard to win over from the southern Ming Empire, he wouldn't even care about this. Even if he did care, with Yu Qian's personality, he would just tell the truth and do the work of the other party. As for personal reasons, he didn't even want to think about it. Yu Qian wasn't that kind of person. In history, if he was willing to go along with other people, his family wouldn't be unable to even afford a coffin after his death. He even needed to take care of the embroidered uniform guards in the future. Inghai, no one can help you with this matter. You have to think of a way to save yourself and complete the mission the king gave you. Yu Qian thought about it and felt that this was the only way. When he heard that he had to complete the mission and meet the king of the 3 provinces, Zhu Huitong, he was afraid that it would be disastrous. Immediately, Dong Chuanfu said with a sad face, "In public, this is a 90% chance of death." Even if it's a 90% chance of death, so what? You still have to go. Yu Qian's face suddenly became serious as he spoke with a firm voice. In history, this person didn't take personal life and death seriously. When the great Ming's wooden fortress was defeated and Yeshen of Walla led his troops, everyone was in a panic. Some people even thought about moving the capital to Nanjing. Only he stood up without hesitation. In the end, he was the one who turned the tide. How could such a person be afraid of death? As long as he thought that something was worth doing, even if he was in the vortex of death, he wouldn't frown. After being refuted by Yu Qian, Dong Chuanfu knew that he had no other choice. He could not go. If he didn't go, he would be removed from his position. Not only that, his descendants wouldn't be allowed to become officials for 3 generations. In that case, the entire Dong family would be harmed by him. He didn't want to be the sinner of the family. "Then I'll go." Dong Chuanfu sighed in his heart and finally made a decision. Go. At worst, he would die. If that was the case, he believed that with this merit, his descendants would also be touched by the glory. He could be considered to have done his last bit for the family. Yugong, it's hard to predict whether this trip will be good or bad. If something happens, I'll have to trouble Yugong to take care of my family. You can rest assured that after you leave, your family won't be bullied by anyone. Besides, with our Yang Xie's current ability, the 3 provincial kings won't dare to do anything to you unless they don't want to live. At the end of his words, Yu Qian's voice involuntarily rose a lot. This was his biggest gain after following Yang Qindong for so many years. That was, he could speak with confidence and was no longer afraid of being attacked by others. Because they didn't find trouble with others, it was already fortunate. On the first floor, someone had already reported to Wan Shaoqian that Dong Chuanfu had appeared and went to find Yu Qian. In this regard, Wan Shaoqian just smiled and said that he understood. Then he went to do what he needed to do. Although he hadn't been in the city lord's mansion for too long, he still understood Yu Qian. This was not a person who was biased. This was something that Yang Qindong said in a very serious tone. Since it was Yang Qindong who said it, Wan Shaoqian naturally didn't have any doubts. Wan Shaoqian believed that City Lord Yu Qian would be able to handle this matter well. The facts also proved that Dong Chuanfu left not long after and returned home. He ordered people to pack his luggage, as if he was going to go on a long journey to the place of the three provincial kings. Yang Qindong didn't pay too much attention to what happened in Crimson City. He left the matter to Yu Qian, Yang Wu, and Luan Shaochen. If it wasn't done well, then wouldn't it mean that the Yangxia had no one to use? Not paying attention to Crimson City, his eyes were more focused on the Bangla Kingdom. After showing a strong attitude and putting it into action, the so-called revenge for the king became quieter and quieter. No one wasn't afraid of death, especially this King Abdul, who didn't treat his people well. After resisting for a few days and paying a huge price, they finally became obedient. When the main force of the five-star army appeared in front of some cities, even more people chose to surrender for their own safety. Faced with the Bangla army that suddenly became docile, the five-star army naturally didn't start a brutal massacre. They acted as if those who surrendered could live and everyone would be fine. As a result, their progress became even faster. In the 12th month of 1466 AD, they arrived at the capital of Bangla, Dhaka city. Here, General Caldell presented his letter of surrender. From then on, this place became one of the territories under Yangxia's control. Chapter 1555. In the palace of Dhaka city, Yang Qindong admired the scenery under the guidance of General Caldell. In the great hall of the palace, Yang Qindong sat high up on the throne and listened to the surrendered general talk about the current situation in Bangra. Ever since King Abdul was assassinated, the situation in the country had been chaotic beyond control. Various factions had emerged. Among them were the Avengers, the Warmongers, those who wanted peace, and those who only cared about themselves. Before this, the five-star army had come with fury and forced the Vengeance faction and the War faction to abandon their weapons and armor. Now they were either dead, injured, or fleeing. They could no longer pose a threat. Otherwise, Caldell, the general of the peace faction, wouldn't have submitted his letter of surrender. However, the warmongers still existed, and they were all generals with military power. For example, Rajiv, who was still causing trouble in Burma, was a representative of this group. According to Caldell, other than Rajiv, Azad, and General Hark each led 10,000 soldiers into Burma from Bangra. They would probably cause some damage. Yang Qindong looked at Caldell's lowered head in self-reproach. He didn't intend to scold him. This had nothing to do with him. It was already a great deed for him to represent Dhaka in surrendering to the five-star army and averting the disaster of war. Very good, General Caldell. You still have some military power in your hands, don't you? Yang Qindong thought about how he would have to face the Bangra army and the three provinces' royal armies, who were provoking him. There would probably be a lot of killing. The security behind him would become even more important. Reporting to King Wunan of Damyang, the guilty general still has 20,000 soldiers. However, they are all foot soldiers and no cavalry. Their combat ability is average. Caldell spoke the truth without any exaggeration. Seeing Caldell's sincerity, Yang Qindong smiled and nodded. 20,000 people, not a small number. This way, you can continue to retain your position as a general. This prince will also leave you with an army to cooperate with you in defending Bangla from the flames of war. Sigh, this place shouldn't be called Bangla. Aren't there a lot of Bengalis here? Let's change the name to Bengal in the future. Are you willing? Originally, he thought that since he was a surrendered general, he would be lucky to be able to keep his life and a small portion of his wealth. Who would have thought that Yang Qindong would trust him so much that he would not deprive him of his military power and even let him guard this place? He was so moved that he immediately knelt on the ground and said, "Thank you, Bugnam of Gojosian, for your kindness. Thank you, Bugnam of Gojosian, for your kindness." There's no need to thank me. Just do your job well. Also, you won't be able to stay here permanently in the future. According to Yang Xie's rules, everyone here will have to move out. During this time, you will have to do the statistics, pacify the people, and do the related propaganda work. Whereas the commander of the Mabe division, Na Ri Song, your subordinate is here. Senior Colonel Na Ri Song, who had been standing in the hall, stepped out of the formation. Na Ri Song had originally been the deputy commander of the Mabe division. However, after leaving the Mabe region and fighting with the army, he was finally promoted to commander. But in reality, he should be the commander of the 2nd Division of the Mabe Division, because the real commander, Xian Honghai, was still in the Mabe region. Commander Na Ri, I now officially appoint you as the commander of the 2nd Division of the Mabe Division. I will leave the matters here to you. General Caldell will cooperate with you. What this prince needs is for the public security here to be restored in the shortest time possible. Are there any problems? Yang Qindong smiled as he looked at the old man, who had followed him for many years. Your subordinate will not disappoint the 6th young master, Na Risong said in a clear voice. This was truly his first time leading an army alone. Before, he had been following the main forces of the 5-star army. Even though he had military merits, it was not as satisfying as leading an army by himself. Now that he had the chance, he would definitely perform well. At the beginning of 1467 AD, when the new year began, Yang Qindong led the main forces of the 5-star army out of Bengal and headed straight for the neighboring Burma province. At this time in Burma, the so-called invading Gera army had already retreated from the territory of the 3 provincial kings of the southern Ming when they heard that the main forces were coming. They didn't even have the courage to face them and retreated thousands of miles away. In February, Yang Qindong's main forces met up with the Burmese, Laotian, and Vietnamese local armies that had been guarding this place for a long time. Yang Qindong saw Bu Hai, the commander of the 7th Division of the Lung Fong Division. Although the other side only had 2,000 people, the 2,000 Lung Fong Firearms Division soldiers had become the main force. If it wasn't for their existence, the Burmese provincial capital would be in even more danger. Yang Qindong praised these people for their tit-for-tat with the Gera army. He said in public that no matter who it was, if they dared to have ideas about Yang Xie, then they would fight back. Not only that, they would also occupy their homeland. At the same time, he announced that the former Gera, now Bangladesh, had become another province of Yang Xie. The generals were naturally encouraged by Yang Qindong's fearless personality. With the arrival of Yang Qindong's main forces, the Burma War also came to an end. However, the overall war was not over. On the contrary, it was just another beginning. For example, the escaped Gera generals Rajiv, Azad, and Hak had already escaped to the territory of the 3 provincial kings. These people were going to be punished. There was also the matter of the 3 provincial king, Zhu Huixin, who had previously sent soldiers to Yunnan province. It was time for an explanation. Several years ago, Yang Qindong had entered the Far East through the first city. Then he had killed his way into Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and now he had returned to Southeast Asia. In this period of time, he had occupied more than twice the territory of Yang Xie, subduing and conquering dozens of small and large countries. From the current map, other than the Yusang region, which was still in battle, the other regions had all fallen into Yang Xie's hands. Whether it was Baiming or Nanming, they were all like meat stuffing in a steamed bun. Dealing with the problem of Nanming and Baiming was also on the agenda. Once they were dealt with, all of Asia would belong to Yang Xie. He was getting closer and closer to conquering the entire world and allowing the Han people to stand at the peak. It's time. With a light sigh, Yang Qindong led his army from Myanmar to Yunnan province. That would be the entrance to the territory of the three provincial kings. The three provincial king, Zhu Huixin, did not look well recently. Originally, Yang Qindong was caught up in the battle with the Khaganate and did not have the energy to deal with him. This should be the time for him to rise. For example, once he conquered Myanmar and Yunnan province, the five-star army would be in a state of chaos. If Yang Qindong divided his forces, there would be a higher chance of him being defeated by the Khaganate alliance. At that time, the massive Yangtze would instantly fall apart. That would be the time for him to rise as the three provincial king. Putting everything else aside, just taking over the territories of Yangtze would be a huge fortune. Just thinking about this made Zhu Huixin extremely excited. This was also the main reason why he dared to send troops to deal with Yang Qindong. However, his wishful thinking was quickly disrupted. When the five-star army destroyed the Khaganate alliance, India, and subdued the Sui kingdom of Delhi, even the Bangra kingdom was crushed. Finally, it was time for him to face the five-star army head-on. When he heard that Yang Qindong had already arrived at the Beijiang prefecture of Yunnan province with the main force of the five-star army, Zhu Huixin was terrified. He immediately looked for Mo Gue, who had provided him with 5 million taels of silver, and asked him for a plan. Mo Gue had appeared when Yang Qindong was confronting the Khaganate alliance. He had also appeared with 5 million taels of silver, saying that it was a gift from his master. He also said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was now trapped in the war in the west, and it was time for them to strike back. After seeing the silver taels and analyzing the situation, especially after seeing that the Gurkha army had already started to attack Myanmar, Zhu Huiyu thought that the opportunity had come. He ordered his subordinate General Wang Zhanjiang to lead 150,000 troops from Liangshan into Yunnan province. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to obtain some benefits. The original plan was very smooth. The sudden attack of the three provincial armies had indeed caught the five-star army off guard. They had taken over Liangshan, Kidai, Langzhuang, and other places. However, they had encountered some difficulties when attacking Beijiang prefecture. Relying on his advantage in numbers, Zhu Huixin did not take it seriously. Until the sudden appearance of the Lungfeng division, the battle had fallen into a stalemate. However, it was just a stalemate. According to General Wang Zhanjiang's report, they could not take down Beijiang prefecture, but the five-star army in the prefecture could not do anything to them either. It was clearly a situation where they were evenly matched. However, now that Yang Qindong had appeared near Beijiang prefecture with more than 200,000 troops, they no longer had the advantage in numbers. It was obvious what would happen next. That was the main force, not the third-rate forces of the provincial armies that they had faced before. The soldiers who were qualified to follow Yang Qindong were definitely veterans who had experienced hundreds of battles and could fight against 10 people each. In such a situation, the first thing Zhu Huixin should do was to order Wang Zhanjiang to retreat. However, he still wanted to try his luck and see if the mysterious man's representative, Mo Gue, had any good suggestions. After all, he felt that the master behind this person was very capable and might be able to save him. He came to Mo Gue's courtyard with hope. As soon as he entered, he saw the man standing in front of the pond in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. Needless to say, he was Mo Gue. At this time, looking at Mo Gue's back, the early morning sun shone on him, giving him a very mysterious feeling. This was the feeling that he needed. He would not forget Uncle Ying's instructions when he came, which was to speak less and act mysterious. In short, the more mysterious, the better. When Yang Qindong heard about this, they became ambassadors and were responsible for negotiating with the kings of the three provinces. They also changed into Yangtze's formal attire, Chinese tunic suits. The leader of the group was Dong Chuanfu, the vice minister of the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs. With his rank, he could be considered a senior official. He could sit in a bright and spacious office in Resin City and give out orders. There would naturally be people working for him. Then he could drink hot tea, take a hot bath that was prepared 24 hours a day, and talk about life. He could enjoy a decent salary and live a happy life with his family. He didn't have to care about the fights outside, but because he didn't keep his mouth shut, he ended up like this. They came to Yunnan Manor. Apart from the pleasant weather, it couldn't compare to Resin City in any way. When they first came here, they were disgusted by the fact that they had to go to the toilet. Thinking back to when they were in Crimson City, whether it was the office building or the building they lived in, there were toilets, and drains that could be used. But now, in this small courtyard, they had to go to the toilet in the same place. The weather was getting hotter and hotter. Just the smell was unbearable, not to mention the flies flying around. Although it was the same in the past, after enjoying the modern treatment in Resin City, the feeling of going back to the old life was worse than death. However, they had no choice because it was Yang Qindong's orders in the first place. Besides, he even named them. Hence, none of them could escape. Even though he knew that it would be difficult to complete the task, he still had to come. He was no longer doing it for himself, but for the sake of his entire family. Along the way, they first arrived in Yunnan province, after which they headed north. During this period, they set off from Beijiang Prefecture, which allowed them to see the true appearance of the battlefield. When they saw the corpses and blood all over the ground, as well as the stench that did not dissipate for a long time, this kind of visual experience was far from what was recorded in the books of the sages. This also made them realize how cruel war was. The slightest carelessness could cause them to lose their lives. They wanted to let them know clearly how tough it was for the Five-Star Army to conquer the East and West. They wanted to let them know that perhaps the Five-Star Army had their own reasons for doing what they did in the Delhi Sultanate. Some people said that reading 10,000 books was not as good as traveling 10,000 miles. That scene was actually happening to Dong Chuanfu and the others now. It was only when their thinking changed that they realized their mistake. When they arrived at Yunnan Prefecture, they were thrown into a small courtyard and not allowed to leave. They also realized that the task, this time, wasn't that easy to complete. If they didn't do it well, they might even lose their lives here. Although the 18 officials were prepared to die, before coming here, they were all prepared to die. However, as long as there was a little hope of survival, who wouldn't try their best to grab it? There was a change in their mentality, and they clearly knew that it wouldn't be easy to leave. Everyone was only thinking about one thing, and that was how to complete the negotiation task given to them by Yang Qindong. As for whether they would still be talkative if they survived this time, the 18 of them would probably become very obedient even without being reminded. However, they had to negotiate first, right? Now that they couldn't even see a single person, who were they supposed to negotiate with? How were they supposed to complete the task? How were they supposed to influence their opponents? Of course, there was no such thing as influence. However, they had to see the person in question before they could talk, right? After being thrown into the courtyard for more than 10 days, everyone's temperament gradually became impatient. While they were reflecting on their mistakes, they were also cursing Zhu Huiyin, the prince of the 3 provinces, in their hearts for being disloyal, unfilial, and immoral. They could only curse in their hearts. After coming to Yunnan Prefecture from Qiqian City, they finally understood what it meant to live under someone else's roof and what it meant to act according to other people's wishes. Especially after seeing the soldiers of the 3 provinces waiting outside the courtyard. They were here to protect their safety, but in fact, weren't they monitoring their every move? If necessary, they might even kill them all. Chapter 1557. At this time, the mentality of Dong Chuanfu and the others had completely changed. They were thinking about two things in their hearts. One was whether they would die or not. If the two sides didn't come to an agreement and went to war, they would probably become the first batch of martyrs. At this time, they had completely forgotten their identity. They were here to negotiate. Rather than placing their hopes on others, they might as well work hard themselves. The second thing they thought about was the change in their mentality. The three provincial kings were truly crazy and wanted to kill them all. They only hoped that the five-star army could avenge them and kill all of the three provincial armies. At this moment, they finally understood the actions of the five-star army in Bangla. They even thought that the five-star army didn't kill enough to intimidate the enemy. Otherwise, why would the three provincial kings look down on them? No, it should be said that they were ignoring them. Everyone knew how to talk high and mighty. Their words didn't have any substance and wouldn't resonate with others. However, if they were in the same situation, they probably wouldn't say any lies, big words, or empty words. From this, it could be seen that Yang Qindong brought these 18 people with different views on war here. The effect was already evident. As the saying goes, if you don't manage the household, you don't know the cost of firewood and rice. Presumably, if they could survive, their opinions would definitely change if there was a war in the future. It was even possible for them to become staunch supporters of war. From this point alone, Yang Qindong's arrangement was correct. In the future, if someone wanted to talk about the cruelty of war and wanted to use benevolence or universal love to talk about it, they only needed to follow the example. Presumably, those dissenting voices would be completely suppressed. Dong Chuanfu and the others spent every day trembling in fear. They didn't know what would happen in the next second. It was like when the door to the courtyard was suddenly opened and Chun Tian suddenly appeared in front of everyone. They instinctively didn't know what was going on. What did this person want to do? As the most trusted minister of the three provincial kings, Chun Tian could definitely be called the number one civil official. Many times his opinions could influence Zhu Huihua. Such a busy and important person suddenly appeared in the small courtyard. Dong Chuanfu and the others were only stunned for a moment before they came to their senses and hurriedly stood up and saluted. Logically speaking, with everyone's status, especially Dong Chuanfu, who was already the vice minister of a department, people like him had the opportunity to take charge of a region and become a provincial governor at any time. His status had already far surpassed Zhu Huihua's subordinate Qin Tian, who only had a territory of 3 provinces. However, under the eaves of others, he had no choice but to lower his head. In order to survive and complete the mission, Dong Chuanfu had to learn how to humble himself. So it's Lord Chun. Excuse me for not going out to meet you. Dong Chuanfu stood up to greet Qin Tian. Although he was happy to be able to talk to Qin Tian, on the surface, Dong Chuanfu still had an unhurried appearance. He probably knew that at this time, he was not only representing himself, but also the powerful Yang faction. Haha, Minister Dong is too polite. Hello, everyone. Qin Tian smiled and greeted everyone. His face was brimming with sincerity. If they were just a group of negotiators, based on Zhu Huihua's trust, Qin Tian really did not put them in his eyes. However, at this moment, he had no choice but to put on an act. This was closely related to the mission he had accepted. Zhu Huihua had just given him a very important mission. If he wanted to complete this mission, he needed the cooperation of Dong Chuanfu and the others in front of him. Although he did not think that this mission had a chance of success, in order to gain the most trust, he decided to take a gamble and give it a try. Being able to speak eloquently was one of Qin Tian's greatest abilities. With his intention, everyone sat together and began to talk. The topic was led in the direction of the result he wanted. At first, everyone was very happy with Chun Tian's goodwill and even his humble attitude. Some people even began to suppress their pride in their hearts. See, in other people's territory, they still had to curry favor with him. Didn't this mean that Yang Xie was now so powerful that no one could be a match for him? However, as the conversation deepened, Chun Tian changed his way of speaking his thoughts and put forward his request. Everyone was speechless, and the pride that had just risen was suppressed back into the bottom of their hearts. As the leader of the 18 people, Dong Chuanfu was even more furious. He loudly rebuked, "This is simply impossible. We will never agree to this request of yours." That's right. Deputy Director Yen Lianshui, who was second only to Dong Chuanfu among the 18 people, also spoke up. "If there is anything you want to discuss, you can discuss it with us. We are here on behalf of Yang Xie. There are many things that Minister Dong can make the decision on. However, I don't know why you want to see Bugnam of Gojoseon. You also want Bugnam of Gojoseon to personally visit Yunnan Manor. Isn't it said that a gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall? Yes, we will never agree to this." For a moment, the 18 envoys actually spoke in unison. Perhaps this was because Chun Tian's request was too excessive, but how could it not be? Because they all knew that they could not agree to this request, nor did they have the authority to agree to it. What kind of joke was this? Inviting Yang Qindong to enter Yunnan Manor and not allowing him to bring more than 500 soldiers? Such excessive conditions were probably something that no one in Yangxie would agree to, right? How could they agree so easily? And even if they did agree, what would it do? Although Dong Chuanfu and the other 18 people were very afraid of death, they were more worried about the safety of their families and clansmen. If because of them, Yang Qindong was in danger and something happened to him, at that time, they were afraid that they and their families would be finished together. Not only that, but their reputations might also go down in history. That was the greatest harm to scholars. Seeing that Dong Chuanfu and the other 18 people were filled with anger, Chun Tian was not angry or anxious. All of this was within his expectations. He did not expect to be able to persuade them with his glib tongue. He came here to deliver the message. Whether it would succeed or not, he did not have much hope. Everyone, don't be anxious. Since it is a negotiation, then of course it is a negotiation. To put it bluntly, we will propose conditions to each other, and everyone will discuss it. Like this, as long as Bugnam of Gojoseon is willing to show his sincerity and not bring more than 500 soldiers into Yunnan Manor, then we will recognize his magnanimity. Our 3 provincial kings will not only apologize to Bugnam of Gojoseon for the previous misunderstanding, but also be willing to give up Guangxi, Yunnan, and Gui province. Chun Tian threw out a bomb as soon as he opened his mouth. Hearing this, Dong Chuanfu and the others were stunned. Didn't this mean that as long as Yang Qindong was willing to come personally, the problem of the 3 provinces would be easily solved, and this place would become one of Yang Xie's forces? Wasn't this the main purpose of Dong Chuanfu? And the others coming here? Taking advantage of this moment of silence, Chun Tian continued to speak. Everyone, our 3 provincial kings have now shown their sincerity. Next, it is up to Bugnam of Gojoseon. I think this matter should be reported and handed over to the higher-ups to make the final decision. I will wait here for your good news. Goodbye. Chun Tian left. However, no one paid attention to him anymore. Everyone was obviously shocked by his words. Just by showing up, Yang Qindong could make the 3 provinces under Yang Xie's control without shedding any blood. This temptation was so great that Dong Chuanfu and the others could not help but swallow their saliva. It took a while for everyone to react, but Chun Tian was already nowhere to be found. Everyone's gaze fell on Dong Chuanfu. Chapter 1558. That might not be the case. Who can guess what the people in power want to do? As for the fact that the 3 provinces are all Han, that's true. However, there are so many Han in the world. Even if we die, the other Han will still be around. In a few years, the population will continue to increase, so it doesn't matter if the 3 provinces have us or not. Phew, doesn't that mean that if Bugnam of Gojoseon doesn't agree to come to Yunnan Manor and accept the allegiance of the 3 provincial kings, then there will be a huge war, and everyone will be in danger? You're smart, brother. That's the truth. So let's pray that Bugnam of Gojoseon will agree. If he doesn't, then it means that he wants to kill us. I will join the army and fight against the 5-star army. No matter how much they have done for the rise of the Han, if they want to kill me and my family, then they are my enemies. I will hand over the 100 Jin and fight them to the death. That's right. That's what I think too. I will also mobilize my family to fight them to the end. Similar conversations continued and continued to spread. After Chen Tian received Zhu Huiying's order to deliberately spread these rumors, the news quickly swept across the 3 provinces like a gust of wind. More and more people came to know about it, and various theories and voices emerged one after another. However, from the beginning to the end, none of these conversations mentioned Zhu Huiying's request for Yang Qindong to not bring more than 500 men with him. The people were being deceived, but no one mentioned it. It was a trap in itself. This was also why Mo Gui gave Zhu Huiying the idea. It would be best if the matter was successful. When Yang Qindong brought 500 soldiers into Yunnan Manor, he would be a fish on the chopping board. However, once something happened to Yang Qindong, Yang Xie would be in chaos. At that time, who would have the time to cause trouble for Zhu Huiying? Not only that, it would also be a good opportunity for Zhu Huihua to show off his might and quickly encroach on Yang Xie's territory. If he failed, Zhu Huihua would not lose anything. On the contrary, he would have many more soldiers in his hands, and he would have more power to fight against the 5-star army. Success or failure was a good thing for him. This was also why Zhu Huichun listened to Mo Gui's advice after some hesitation. Although by doing so, he would inevitably offend Yang Qindong. But even if he did not do this, how good would the result be? The rumors were still spreading. Dong Chuanfu and the others in the small courtyard were completely unaware of this. After a discussion, the 18 of them wrote a report and sent it to the telegraphist accompanying them, asking him to pass the news to Bugnam of Gojoseon. With the power of Yang Xie's intelligence department, the news of what happened in Yunnan Manor had already reached Yang Qindong's ears. Then, the report written by the 18 people was sent to the desk. As the messenger, Beta Persei was naturally very familiar with the contents, so the moment he put down the telegram, he said tentatively, "Young master, this is clearly Zhu Huiying's evil intentions. Don't be fooled by him." Beta Persei's words were well-founded. He had been by Yang Qindong's side for many years and understood his master well. He was a master who was not afraid of anything and loved to take risks. If this happened to other masters, Beta Persei would not be worried at all because no one would take such a risk. However, it was completely different when it came to Yang Qindong. He really had the courage to do something unimaginable. If it was the Yang Xie of the past, with a weak foundation, small territory, and small population, it would be worth taking a risk. However, Yang, she had already grown into a towering tree. He was even stronger than the Northern Ming Empire and the Southern Ming Empire. Hence, such a risk had completely lost its meaning. Yes, I know, Yang Qindong smiled and looked at Beta Persei, knowing that this person was saying this for his own good. However, how could he not know that Zhu Huiying was taking a risk? If he went, he might stay there forever and even face the risk of being killed. If he did not go, the Han people of the three provinces would inevitably fail and become enemies with him. In this way, regardless of the outcome, the Han people would die. In this way, no matter what, it would not be worth it, and he would only be the loser in the end. This was indeed a difficult choice. If he wanted to break out of this situation and obtain the ruling power of the three provinces at the lowest price, it seemed that the only feasible way was to take the risk. However, Qin Tian's words alone were not enough. He still needed to continue to expand the matter and use Qin Tian's mouth to make the matter a reality. Yang Qindong stood there for a long time without saying a word. Slowly, a plan began to take shape in his mind. In the small courtyard, less than half a day later, they received a personal call from Yang Qindong. After reading the contents of the report, Dong Chuanfu and the other 18 people, in addition to sighing in admiration of their king's boldness, also learned about what had happened outside and the rumors that Qin Tian had spread. Qin Tian is a despicable person, Yan Lianshui said angrily. That's right, he is a despicable person. However, in the face of a gentleman like our king, he can only give in. Men, tell the soldiers guarding us that we want to see Qin Tian. We have something important to tell him. At this moment, Dong Chuanfu was full of energy. After receiving Yang Qindong's personal telegram, he had more confidence when he spoke. After the soldiers guarding the courtyard heard Dong Chuanfu's request, they did not dare to delay and immediately reported it to Qin Tian. Chapter 1559. Although Dong Chuanfu was puzzled by Qin Tian's behavior, he did not think too much about it and repeated what he had just said. This time, Qin Tian could be said to have heard it very clearly. Because of this, he was very surprised. With just this request, Yang Qindong would bring 500 followers into Yunnan Manor. Was he not worried about his own safety? Puzzled, he repeated his question. Just this one request? Yes, just this one request, but these notices must be posted all over the streets and alleys of the three provinces so that all the people know about this. At that time, my king will come to Yunnan Manor and give the three provincial kings a chance to turn over a new leaf. Dong Chuanfu raised his head and said proudly, "Look, this was their king. The so-called danger was nothing in his eyes at all. Just this boldness alone was something they could never learn." "Okay, no problem." Qin Tian agreed immediately. He just wanted to spread the news and let the people of the three provinces know. But what was the use of this? To threaten the people? Ha ha. At that time, ordinary people did not have any status. Often, when the noblemen and officials said that the country was prosperous and the people were at peace, they were referring to the scholars and the noble families because they were often with the noblemen. In the eyes of the noblemen, if these people were satisfied, then the people of the world would be satisfied. Because of this, Qin Tian really did not know the use of Yang Qindong's request. So what if the people of the three provinces were at his beck and call? Could these people turn the world upside down? The result of this meeting was a happy ending. After Qin Tian left, he went to see Zhu Huiyan and told him about Dong Chuanfu and the others, or rather Yang Qindong's request. The three provincial kings were very happy to hear it. Ha ha ha, great news, great news. As long as Yang Qindong enters Yunnan Manor, he will be the prey in our eyes. He will not be able to turn the world upside down. At that time, we will be able to use the emperor to order his vassals. No matter how big the territory and how much wealth, it will be ours. Qingong, let's go and settle this matter immediately. In order to prevent any undue delay, this matter has to be done quickly. Also, send someone to keep an eye on Yunnan Manor to prevent this Bugnam of Gojoseon from secretly sending people into the city. Yang Qindong's strength, although Zhu Huitu didn't experience it too much, but looking at the opponents he dealt with, he knew that this person was very powerful. In order to prevent the other party from playing any tricks in the dark, he had to strengthen his control over Southern Cloud Manor, especially in terms of military force. As for public opinion, Zhu Huichen really didn't care. As long as he had money, food, and soldiers, ordinary people would have to look up to him. Yu Qian thought that even if he couldn't see the day when the Han people unified the world, his son and grandson had to see it and participate in it. But now, just as the hope was getting bigger and bigger, Yang Qindong wanted to take the initiative to take the risk, so how could he let it go? If Yang Qindong hadn't sent a telegram to Yang Wu and Deputy City Lord Luan Shaoqin in Crimson City to keep an eye on Yu Qian, he probably would have already boarded a ship and rushed over. Even so, Yu Qian still sent 3 telegrams a day to express his determination, and also warned Yang Qindong not to take the risk. The public opinion could be fought for in the future, but he couldn't take the risk and regret it for the rest of his life. Imperial Palace of Crimson City. Yang Bo, who was already 10 years old, had already grown into a handsome young man. Ever since his father left Crimson City 6 years ago, he had not returned. In other words, Yang Bo, who was already 10 years old, had not seen his father for more than 6 years. However, this did not affect the glorious image of Yang Qindong in his heart. Putting aside everything else, in the past 6 years, Yang Qindong had restored the Far Eastern province and taken down Eastern Europe and Central Asia. He had destroyed countless countries and increased the wealth, territory, and population of the Yangtze. It wouldn't be long before news of a great victory came from the front. When the little Yang Bo heard this, he felt a sense of pride and glory. From how he saw it, this was why his father was so amazing, and he felt proud to have such a father. With his father as his role model, Yang Bo did not live a pampered life because of his status as the crown prince. On the contrary, he worked even harder than the children of other families. He studied and learned how to wield his saber, and he had done some research on firearms. As the Empress Mother, Hu Yan naturally gave her full support. Whatever Yang Bo wanted to learn, the top talents in the entire Crimson City could be his teachers, allowing him to ask any questions he wanted. With great support, Yang Bo was more opinionated than his peers, and he was also more mature. He had always thought that he had to work hard so that when his father returned to Crimson City, he would be praised by his father. He wanted to enjoy the fatherly love and praise that only children could enjoy. From their point of view, Bugnam of Gojoseon, who could destroy the Mongolians and the surrounding foreign tribes, moved into Yunnan Manor. It was the same as returning to his own home. How could there be any danger? On the contrary, if Bugnam of Gojoseon did not come, it would mean that he did not want them, and their lives would be in danger. In order to survive, they had to work hard to become the 3 provinces' army and fight against the 5-star army on the battlefield. It had to be said that Zhu Huiyu had the upper hand in public opinion this time. He was now using public opinion to threaten Yang Qindong and force him to take the risk to come to Yunnan Manor. Yang Qindong, who knew everything, could not think of a way to solve the problem, so he decided to take the risk this time. Naturally, this risk was very dangerous in the eyes of others, but in Yang Qindong's eyes, it was not a big deal. If he was forced into a corner, he could use the big warehouse. But before he was at the end of his rope, it was better not to expose his bottom line. He would not forget that from all kinds of clues, there was a pair of eyes staring at him in the dark. And before he found the traitor, it was best not to use his trump card. This was equivalent to an additional insurance. If he did not want to use the big warehouse, the 500 people who came this time must be carefully selected. Of course, Yang air volunteered himself and insisted on following him. Next was the 2,000 Black Cavalry, the Long Brothers, and the self-proclaimed elite warriors of the world's first cavalry army. However, there were only 500 people to follow. Even if the black cavalry had 2,000 people, how could there be anyone else's turn? Out of 2,000 people, only 500 could be brought. With a ratio of 4-1, all the black cavalry wanted to join. In their hearts, it was all thanks to Yang Qindong that they could have a good life and social status now. Now that their master needed them, of course, they would not shirk their responsibility. Yang Qindong handed this difficult matter to Beta Persei to handle. He believed that this Yang family servant would do his best to protect his safety. If that was the case, who would he bring along? He must be more nervous than himself. Beta Persei also lived up to Yang Qindong's expectations. After getting the power to choose the soldiers, he called for 2,000 black cavalry and held an internal martial arts competition in a small area. The first 500 people could follow. As for the others, if they did not seize the opportunity, then sorry, they could only stay here quietly. In the afternoon, 500 of the most elite black cavalry were selected. Beta Persei immediately transferred a batch of firearms to them. Then, under the worried eyes of the 5-star army generals, they went straight from Beijiang Prefecture to Yunnan Prefecture under the banner of Bugnam of Gojoseon. When Zhu Huiqiu thought about how long it would take for Yang Qindong to appear in front of him and even be controlled by him, then he might indirectly control the entire Yang family. His heart began to beat faster and faster, and it didn't slow down. In his excitement, he secretly mobilized the elite forces in his hands to get closer to Yunnan Prefecture. What he needed to do was to wait for Yang Qindong to enter the city and find the right opportunity to control him for his own use. In order to successfully complete this mission, he continuously mobilized the elite forces under him from the provinces and gathered outside Yunnan Prefecture. At the same time, he also sent out a large number of scouts to pay attention to the main forces of the 5-star army in the south of Langsun. Once he found out that they were acting strangely, he would use Yang Qindong as an excuse to immediately send troops to attack and take the initiative first. However, from the information he received so far, the main forces of the 5-star army were very obedient. They seemed to believe that Yang Qindong could succeed in the peace talks and did not have the slightest intention of moving to the 3 provinces. This made Zhu Huiqiu feel relieved, but at the same time, he cursed the stupidity of the 5-star army in his heart. 10 days later, when he learned that Yang Qindong and his 500 men were less than 3 days away from Yunnan Prefecture, Zhu Huiqiu called a group of his confidants to a secret room to discuss and perfect the military plan. Other than his #1 think tank, Chun Tian, there were 4 of his generals present. They were General Meng, General Wu Yingtu, General Zhang Jiang, and General Kai Wenju. Over the years, Zhu Huiqiu had been constantly developing and expanding his strength and had gathered a group of capable people. For example, these 4 generals were one of them. There was also General Luo Guan, who guarded Yunnan, General Jiang Wuqing, who guarded Guangxi, and General Bai Kuan, who guarded Guangxi. In the secret room, the 6 of them met, and Zhu Huiqiu took the lead to announce the final plan, which was how to capture Yang Qindong alive and not kill him. Of course, if Yang Qindong died, Yang Xie would fall into chaos. However, for the sake of benefits, Zhu Huiqiu did not want to see a chaotic Yang Xie. What he wanted was to use them for his own purposes. Even if he could not take over all of Yang Xie's territory, if he could take over a third of it, it would be a land that was much larger than the Great Ming Dynasty. Chapter 1561. Unless absolutely necessary, don't kill him. In the secret chamber, Zhu Huihua made the final decision. The other 5 people nodded one after another. After each of them described the situation on their side, Qin Tian finally said, "Your Majesty, there are 2 more things to report to you." "Speak," Seeing that Qin Tian was so formal, Zhu Huihua's attitude was also extremely serious. Your Majesty, our people have noticed that the Shiping King's Mu family has been very active recently. I'm afraid that they will become one of the uncertain factors. Qin Tian reported the discovery of the Mu family as a big matter. The other party had been operating in Yunnan for many years. Their influence were spread far and wide. It was not something that could be wiped out in a few years. If they jumped out to cause trouble at the crucial time, it would cause problems. Zhu Huihua frowned first, then quickly relaxed and said, "It's fine. They will not cooperate with Yang Qindong. They would rather this person die here. We just need to keep an eye on them." This was not wrong at all. Yang Qindong was Zhu Huihua's enemy, so how could he not be the enemy of the Southern Ming Empire? The Mu family had been indebted to the great Ming Empire for generations. If there was a chance to eliminate Yang Qindong, the biggest threat to the great Ming Empire, they would not let it go easily. Therefore, most of the people from the Mu family came to kill Yang Qindong, and it was impossible for them to save people. Since Zhu Huihua said that he knew about this matter, Qin Tian did not say anything more. Both sides made the final arrangements regarding Yang Qindong's arrival. If they could not capture Yang Qindong alive, then they could only kill him. No matter what, this time, they would not allow Yang Qindong to leave Yunnan Manor alive. The news that Yang Qindong was coming to Yunnan Manor to negotiate with Zhu Huihua and peacefully take over Yun, Guang, and Gue provinces had long been spread among the people. In order to witness this great moment, all the Han people in Yunnan Manor were looking forward to it. Even the people in the surrounding towns were waiting for good news. To them, there was no better news than being able to survive a calamity without going through a war. After all, the people who would suffer the most in the chaos of war would be the people. 3 days later, outside the southern city gate of Yunnan Manor, Qin Tianzheng led a group of people to welcome the arrival of Yang Qindong's team. Zhu Huiqin did not appear. Instead, he used the excuse that he was not feeling well to hide. This was what he had to be careful about. Mo Gue also reminded him that Yang Qindong was a very powerful person. He didn't act according to common sense. Don't get kidnapped as soon as you see him. If that happened, you would suffer a double loss. Regarding this, Zhu Huilu deeply agreed. In order to prevent Yang Qindong from having the opportunity to deal with or capture him alive before the situation was under control, he would not meet with Yang Qindong. This time, he only sent Qin Tian as his representative. Yang Qindong's team came from afar. They were all dressed in black armor and black horses. Every one of the black cavalry had a saber at their waist and a firearm on their back. When the 500 people lined up neatly, they gave off the feeling of a magnificent army. He had long heard of the legends of the black cavalry's ability to fight, but he had never seen it before. He thought that the world had exaggerated their abilities. But when they faced each other, Qin Tian felt a strong, murderous aura rushing towards him. At this moment, his expression changed greatly. He couldn't help but think to himself, "It's only 500 black cavalry, but they already give off the feeling of a magnificent army. It's invincible. If there were 2,000 black cavalry, even if he sent out 20 or 30,000 people, he wouldn't be able to cause any damage to the enemy in a short time. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. We only agreed on 500 people. It seems like Yang Qindong is also abiding by the rules." Qin Tian said in his heart, "Thank goodness. Thank goodness." With a smile on his face, he quickly led his men to welcome them. Yang Qindong was no stranger to Qin Tian. They had interacted many times before. Thus, he recognized him from afar. But when he didn't see Zhu Huilio's figure, Yang Qindong deliberately pretended to be unhappy and asked, "What's wrong? The 3 provincial kings didn't come?" Although all of this was within his expectations, Zhu Huilu wouldn't easily show himself and wouldn't give him a chance to capture the king first. However, he still had to show his anger. Seeing Yang Qindong's sullen face, Qin Tian didn't know why, but his heart couldn't help but beat faster. He hurriedly bowed and said, "I'm really sorry. My king has been having a stomachache since last night. He hasn't recovered yet, so I can only come to welcome him. But please don't worry, Bugnam of Gojoseon. Once my king recovers, he will immediately come to see you." With an apologetic look, when Yang Qindong looked at him, Qin Tian couldn't help but avoid his eyes. After all, he was lying, so he was somewhat lacking in confidence. How could Yang Qindong not know that Qin Tian wasn't telling the truth? However, if he turned around and left because of this, it would be making a mountain out of a molehill. Moreover, he originally planned to enter Yunnan Manor. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to carry out his plans one by one. All right, then please send my regards to the health of the 3 provincial kings. This king hopes to see him as soon as possible, so that we can discuss the matters of the 3 provinces as soon as possible. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon's intentions. This official will definitely pass on your message to my king. Then, can we enter the city now? There are many people in the city waiting to see Bugnam of Gojoseon. Seeing that the matter was over, Qin Tian hurriedly changed the topic. Oh, hearing that the people were lining the streets to welcome him, Yang Qindong's face lit up with joy. That's right, this king is really happy that the people are so fond of him. I'll have to trouble Lord Chen to lead the way. You're too kind. This is what I should do. Bugnam of Gojoseon, please. Qin Tian chuckled. After bowing and making an inviting gesture, he immediately turned around and walked in front. When he turned around, he intentionally looked at the armored general who was following beside him. This person was Wang Zhanjiang. On the surface, he was in charge of the safety of Yang Qindong's group. However, in reality, he was observing if there was a suitable opportunity to make a move. When Qin Tian was welcoming Yang Qindong, he was observing from the side. However, the result disappointed him. From the performance of the 500 black cavalry, Yang Qindong was tightly protected in the middle. If he had to make a move forcefully, not only would he not be able to gain any advantage, he might even let the other party escape in the chaos. This would greatly disappoint the king's expectations. Without even a 20% chance of success, Wang Zhanjiang naturally wouldn't make a move so easily. He decided to wait for Yang Qindong to enter the city before making a move. No matter what, it was easier to enter the city than to leave. At that time, the initiative would be in his hands. He inconspicuously shook his head, telling Qin Tian that the opportunity wasn't ripe yet. Qin Tian nodded his head discreetly, indicating that he understood. Then, he strode into the Southern Cloud Manor. The 2 sides of the streets in the city were already filled with Han commoners who came to watch the show. In the past, they had only heard of how powerful Bugnam of Gojoseon was. There were even rumors that he had 3 heads and 6 arms. However, no one had actually seen what he looked like. Now that there was a chance to see his true appearance, who would be willing to let go of such an opportunity? Regarding the commoners in the city who were surrounding the 2 sides of the street, Zhu Huiyan and his subordinates discussed and didn't disperse them. After all, the commoners were the most insignificant existence to them. They didn't care about the so-called true public opinion. If they wanted to watch, then they could come and watch. This way, Yang Qindong would lower his guard. After all, with so many commoners watching, the other party would definitely think that they were sincere in negotiating. This would be beneficial to them. However, Zhu Huiyan didn't even think about it. He didn't even dare to go out of the city to welcome them. This already proved that he lacked confidence. How could Yang Qindong easily believe him. However, he was happy to see the commoners of the 3 provinces because he had already prepared gifts for these commoners. Yang Chendong entered the city. In front of him was Chen Tian and his men. They were responsible for opening the way and ensuring the safety along the way. Every 2 steps, there was a soldier from the 3 provinces guarding the place. They looked as if they were facing a great enemy. However, they weren't targeting the 5-star army, but the people from Shiping King's Mu family. They were afraid that their appearance would disrupt their king's plan. Yang Chendong entering the city was equivalent to entering Zhu Huiyun's pot. How he wanted to see it all depended on his mood. However, if Yang Chendong died here at this time, it wouldn't meet the conditions for him to maximize his benefits. Therefore, they could only guard against the Mu family's army. It was reasonable for the soldiers on the street to be so nervous. Although Chen Tian was walking in front, his attention was always on the people behind him. When he saw Yang Chendong entering the city under the protection of 500 black cavalry, he breathed a long sigh of relief. He was worried that the other party would leave without even entering the city gate. In that case, all the plans would be child's play. But now, the other party had entered the city, and everything that followed was no longer up to the other party. The black cavalry entered the city. Yang Chendong, who was riding on the only white horse, the White Dragon, was greeted by the curious gazes of the commoners. At that moment, he also put a smile on his face, showing a refreshing appearance. But his lips moved slightly. Beta Persei, you can move now. Come on, it's time to distribute the flyers. In the future, everyone will be a family. After joining the Yangtze, all Han people must first apply for an identity certificate. Then, with the identity certificate, each person can receive 20 mu of fertile land. Not only that, with the proof of Han nationality, whether it's farming, business, or other things, you can be exempted from 30% of the tax. If you are willing to go to other provinces under the Yangtze, you can get more fertile land, ranging from 50 mu to 100 mu. Chapter 1562. Come, everyone take a look. With your identity as a Han citizen, you can buy rice, grain, and oil at a 20% discount in Yangtze's territory in the future. Shouts and cries rang out one after another. The black cavalry, who were already prepared, took out the printed flyers and handed them to the commoners on the streets. In an instant, many of the commoners had such leaflets in their hands. Although some of them were illiterate, they could understand the language. When they heard the descriptions from the Black Knight dragon guards, their eyes were already dazzled. They looked at the leaflet in their hands and carefully put it away. They decided to go back and find someone who could read to listen to what was written on it. The black cavalry dragon guards' actions were truly beyond Chen Tian and the others' expectations. Wang Zhanjiang's eyes widened as he leaned closer to Chen Tian and whispered, "Lord Chen, do you need us to go and stop these people?" How could Chen Tian not know that Yang Chendong was trying to win the hearts of the people? However, a little impatience would spoil a great plan. There were so many people on the streets. If they were to make a move, the consequences would be unpredictable. If Yang Chendong were to escape in the chaos, then the loss would outweigh the gain. Chen Tian, who did not dare to take the risk, could only grit his teeth and say, "Let them distribute. As long as something happens to Bugnam of Gojoseon, these flyers will naturally be useless. It's fine." Just like that, without anyone stopping them, the 500 black cavalry's bulging chests quickly deflated. The 100,000 flyers were all distributed. Yang Chendong smiled with satisfaction. He believed that after these policies were made known to the people, there would be a huge change in the hearts of the people in the 3 provinces. This would be very helpful in promoting the subsequent takeover of this place. It could be said that the first thing he did after entering the city was successfully completed. Finally, after passing through the long street, under the guidance of Chintian and the others, they finally arrived at a relatively independent courtyard with 4 entrances. Apart from a courtyard, there were no other buildings in the area. It was very quiet. Along the way, no one came out to cause trouble. The Move family members who originally wanted to jump out also restrained their impulse to make a move. Perhaps they also knew that under the protection of a large number of soldiers from the 3 provinces, Yang Chendong also had the extremely elite 500 black cavalry by his side to protect him. In addition, there were so many people on this street. Forcefully making a move would not gain the slightest advantage. Bugnam of Gojoseon, this is the resting place that my king has prepared for you. Since there are too many of you, the 3-sectioned courtyard nearby will also be given to you. Are you satisfied with that? Chintian asked with a smile. From his expression, there was not a trace of hostility. Not bad, I'm satisfied. Yang Chendong smiled and nodded. Beta Persei, who was standing at the side, shouted, Dao Xiao, Ba Dao Jiang, lead the team in to investigate. Immediately, the 200 black cavalry dismounted and entered. After about a quarter of an hour, the 2 captains walked out and nodded at Beta Persei. Chun Tian was not surprised to see the black cavalry being so careful. He would not hide anyone in this courtyard. He did not think that such a lowly method would be able to take down Yang Chendong. Of course, it was not that he did not do anything. He also believed that Yang Chendong would be able to see through it, but there was nothing he could do. Bugnam of Gojoseon, you must be tired after such a long journey. Why don't you take a rest first? After that, someone will send food and drinks. Everything will wait for my king to recover before starting the peace talks immediately. Is that okay? Seeing that the matter was settled, Chun Tian cupped his hands and prepared to leave. Thank you for your trouble, Master Chen. I won't see you out. Yang Chendong still had a smile on his face. I wouldn't dare. Goodbye. After Chun Tian said this, he turned to General Wang Zhanjiang and said, Leave 1,000 soldiers outside the courtyard. They must ensure the safety of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Without orders, no one is allowed to approach this place. Otherwise, they will be killed without mercy. Please rest assured, Master Chen. Wang Zhanjiang replied happily. When Yang Chendong heard this, the smile on his face grew wider. This was clearly an act for him. On the surface, it was to protect them, but in reality, it was just to monitor them. After saying this, Chun Tian turned to look at Yang Chendong and said with a smile, This humble official will take his leave. Well said, well said. By the way, I will have to trouble you to send Dong Chuanfu and the others out of the city. Since I am here, there is no need for him to stay here. Yang Chendong made a timely request. Compared to Yang Chendong's importance, Dong Chuanfu was not even worth a fart. Chun Tian did not want to go against Yang Chendong over such a small matter, so he immediately nodded and agreed. After Chun Tian left, Yang Chendong also entered the courtyard. Then he saw Beta Persei saying with an indignant expression, Young master, this humble one just took a look. There are 2 courtyards and a total of 6 doors. 2 of them are front doors, 2 back doors, and 2 side doors. This is really not easy to defend. Why didn't the other party find us a large courtyard with 5 courtyards? Why did they have to put together 2 courtyards? This is clearly to create a loophole. How could Yang Chendong not see looking through the other Beta Persei's angry expression? If Yang Chendong was 99% sure and said that just take care of the main ulterior motives towards him. As for the rest, he was 100% sure now. Since that was the case, there was no point in saying more. Everything depended on their own means. It seems that the other party doesn't want me dead, but wants me alive. Interesting. His appetite is really big. Yang Chendong muttered to himself as Beta Persei left to make arrangements. He was very curious about how the other party would target him. He also wanted to see how long the other party could endure. After Chen Tian left the courtyard, he arranged for someone to let Dong Chuanfu and the others leave. Then, he strode towards the king's mansion of the 3 provinces. Zhu Huitong could no longer calm down and was pacing back and forth in the hall. When he saw Chen Tian, he asked nervously, "How is it?" "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Bugnam of Gojoseon has fallen into the trap. He has now been arranged to stay in the courtyard. General Wang Zhanjiang is waiting there with his men." As he spoke, Chen Tian began to talk about the situation along the way in detail from the moment he saw Yang Qindong. Zhu Huitong didn't care about the leaflets in the city promoting the Yang Xie policy at all. Yang Qindong couldn't even protect himself. So how could the policy be implemented? It was just a pie in the sky. There was nothing to be afraid of. What he cared about was that Yang Qindong had entered the city and lived in a courtyard with 6 doors. This would also determine whether the initiative was completely in his hands. Good, very good. After hearing that Yang Qindong had entered the courtyard, Zhu Huitong was so excited that his face flushed red. Then he paced back and forth in the hall and said, "Chen Gonggong, if we take action tonight, what are the chances of success?" If we capture a dead Yang Qindong, there wouldn't be any problem. After all, there are only 500 of them. However, if we want to capture him alive, it will be difficult. Chen Tian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a while before saying this. "No, this is such a good opportunity. Of course, we have to capture Yang Qindong alive." Zhu Huitong shook his head. With such a good opportunity, if they only let Yang Qindong die, they wouldn't be able to maximize the benefits. This was obviously not what he wanted. "Chen Gonggong, do you think we can think of something with the food? For example, poison? We can't. If we can think of this method, the other party will definitely think of it as well. They must have prepared many methods to check the food we send. Once they find out, they will definitely fight to the death. Unless it's absolutely necessary, it's best not to do this." Chen Tian hurriedly shook his head. The Black Knight Dragon Guards were elites. How could something as simple as poisoning really make things difficult for the other party? Yes. This king didn't think it through. Zhu Huitong knew that he was too agitated and didn't think carefully enough. Then, according to Chen Gonggong, what should we do? Chen Tian was already prepared for this. When faced with this question, he almost immediately answered, "Your Majesty, Yang Qindong has just arrived, so he will definitely be on high alert. It's not appropriate to attack blindly. However, we can give it a try. For example," Chen Tian muttered into Zhu Huitong's ear. Zhu Huitong nodded continuously as he listened, his face glowing with excitement. In the courtyard, Yang Qindong sat in the main hall reading a biography in his hand. This was the only copy that one of his subordinates found. It recorded some of the experiences and descriptions of the mountains and rivers written by a person named Wang Pu after his travels. There were many records about the 3 provinces. In the future, this place would become one of his territories. Of course, Yang Qindong had to know more about it. When Beta Persei finished arranging everything and entered the main hall, he secretly admired Yang Qindong in his heart when he saw him sitting there quietly reading a book. At this time, his young master was still calm. It was no wonder that he could conquer such a huge country. Seeing that Yang Qindong was reading, Beta Persei turned to leave. However, Yang Qindong spoke at this time. "Beta Persei, empty the row of rooms in the backyard. Someone will send something later. Just leave it there." "Something? What is it?" Beta Persei asked in confusion. He didn't receive any notice. This was Yunnan Manor, not Yangxie's territory. How could someone send something here? Yang Qindong suddenly raised his head and looked at Beta Persei. That gaze made Beta Persei's heart tighten. He suddenly thought that it must be an extremely confidential matter. His question just now was obviously superfluous. He immediately said, "Yes, young master, I'll arrange for someone to empty that place." Chapter 1563. After he finished speaking, Beta Persei turned around and left after seeing that Yang Qindong had no intention of saying anything else. Leaving Yang Qindong alone in the main hall, he let out a sigh of relief. Of course, he would not let anyone else know about the secret of Datsang. Not even Beta Persei. Yang Qindong was very clear about the principle that if the emperor did not keep the secret, he would lose his minister, and if the minister did not keep the secret, he would lose his chastity. Ever since the king of Bangla was assassinated, he always had a feeling that an invisible net was covering his head, and he always felt that someone was watching him in the dark. Although he had wanted to trace the origin of this feeling, unfortunately, there was nothing, because this was just a feeling he had. However, Yang Qindong believed this feeling without any evidence, and before he found the traitor, he would not easily trust anyone. Of course, he believed in people like Beta Persei who followed him all the time, but he could not guarantee that the people around Beta Persei were reliable. In order to reduce the complications, it was better not to tell anyone. As for the row of houses in the backyard, Yang Qindong naturally wanted to put weapons there. This time, although the 500 black cavalry also brought firearms with them, they were very limited. This was especially true for ammunition, which was extremely lacking. And if they had enough ammunition, the 500 black cavalry would be enough to guard the small courtyard and prevent any enemy from advancing. It was dark. The 3 provincial armies sent food for the 500 black cavalry. Beta Persei brought Dao Xiao and Ba Daojiang to check carefully and did not find any problems. But for the sake of safety, they only sent a squad of 10 black cavalry to try first. After seeing that there were no adverse reactions after an hour of eating, everyone began to eat. Yang Qindong agreed, with everyone's caution. Although he did not think that the 3 provincial armies would do anything because it would only prove the other party's stupidity, it was better to be safe than sorry. After the meal, the small courtyard became quiet. A total of 500 black cavalry, a total of 200 people were arranged to be on night watch. They were hidden in every corner of the 2 courtyards, showing the caution of the black cavalry. The black cavalry was not only strong in individual combat, but also had a good sense of obedience and loyalty. What was more, they were cautious. When they should be bold, they would charge forward. When they should be careful, they would be extremely cautious like an embroidered woman. It was late at night. The figure of the night watchman walked past the street outside the door and sounded the 3rd night watch. Not long after the night watchman walked past the street, hundreds of black shadows suddenly appeared from everywhere and began to gather outside the street. These black-clothed people were extremely familiar with the terrain of this street. They avoided the sentries of the 3 provincial armies one after another and arrived outside the small courtyard. Then they gathered into a flood. From afar, there were about 150 people. Their footsteps were light, their movements nimble, their landings silent, and there was no wind when they moved. They were undoubtedly experts. As soon as they appeared outside the small courtyard, their footsteps did not stop for too long. Instead, they jumped over the wall and stood guard. They appeared to be in good order. Soon, the back door of the 3 courtyard was opened from the inside. A group of black-clothed people entered in a single file and quickly charged towards the 4 courtyard on the other side. Attack! Just as these black shadows did not encounter any obstacles along the way and arrived at the side door of the 4 courtyard, a loud roar suddenly sounded. Then there was the sound of flames spewing out. Bullets flew out, and covered the bodies of those black-clothed people. The black-clothed people were completely unprepared for this sudden attack. Just this attack alone caused at least 100 corpses to fall. Less than a third of the black-clothed people retreated in panic. However, since they were already here, how could they possibly let them retreat? Unknowingly, a row of black knights and dragon guards had appeared behind them. They had 2 light machine guns, and the rest were Type 95. Just like that, they swept across the area. When the bullets landed among the shadows, there were screams after screams. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Yang Chendong's voice sounded in the dark night. Unknowingly, he was already standing in the small courtyard. Beta Persei and Dao Xiao were standing on either side of him. The gunshots did not seem to have any intention of stopping. In less than a minute, the last 50 black-clothed people had all fallen into a pool of blood. From the beginning to the end, they did not even have a chance to draw their swords. They did not even see the shadows of their opponents before they were all turned into corpses. Young Master is amazing. Beta Persei and Dao Xiao looked at each other and sighed. Just an hour ago, Yang Chendong suddenly called them, including Ba Daojiang, and asked them to be prepared to face the enemy at any time. Sure enough, the enemy appeared. They were caught off guard and did not cause any losses to themselves. This was how Beta Persei and the others admired Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong was a human, not a god. Of course, he did not know if the enemy would appear or when they would appear. He only had an instinctive feeling that Zhu Huituan would not be idle on the first night. If things went wrong, he would launch a probing attack. That was why he called Beta Persei and the others to prepare. However, he took this opportunity to go to the empty house in the backyard. With his strength as a grandmaster, he did not attract anyone's attention. Then, the place was filled with all kinds of weapons and ammunition taken out from the warehouse. After everything was done, Yang Chendong could finally breathe a sigh of relief. With the existence of these firearms, anyone who wanted to cause trouble for him would only be courting death. The gunshots in the courtyard quickly attracted the attention of General Wang Zhanjiang, who was in charge of security outside the courtyard. He rushed into the courtyard with a large number of soldiers from the 3 provinces. At this time, the torches had been lit and shone on the corpses. What's going on? What's going on? Wang Zhanjiang, who rushed into the courtyard, instinctively pulled out his sword. This action immediately attracted the aim of no less than 5 black muzzles. This really scared him. He felt as if his whole body could not move at this moment. Put down your guns. Beta Persei strode over and said loudly to the black cavalry. Then he looked at Wang Zhanjiang and said righteously, General Wang, these people are all assassins. They wanted to harm Bugnam of Gojoseon, but we found them and killed them all. But I don't know how so many people appeared here. What are your people doing outside? Wang Zhanjiang did not know how to answer. Chun Tian did not inform him of this probing operation because he did not want to complicate things. So General Wang, who was completely unaware, did not know how to answer. Looking at Wang Zhanjiang's stammering and flushed face, Yang Er shook his head. Without waiting for Wang Zhanjiang's answer, he said, All right, since you're here, I'll have to trouble you to transport these corpses out. After speaking, Beta Persei turned to leave. At this time, Ba Daojiang came forward and whispered, Second brother, we've used up 1/5 of our gunpowder in this battle. If this continues, I'm afraid, let's go back and talk. Beta Persei glared at Ba Daojiang, then turned and strode away, and all this was seen by Wang Zhanjiang. At this moment, his heart trembled, as if he had understood something. Because of Wang Zhanjiang's arrival, the assassins' corpses were quickly moved out by the 3 provinces' army. Then the general went straight to the 3 provinces' palace Without stopping, Chun Tian did not go back to rest. He was waiting for news here. After seeing Wang Zhanjiang's arrival, he and Zhu Huiqiu listened to his report seriously. After hearing that the 150 skilled assassins were all dead and did not cause any casualties to the 5-star army, both Zhu Huiqiu and Chun Tian stopped talking. They did not expect this operation to be successful, but at least they could injure some of the black cavalry. But now, it seemed that they had underestimated their opponent's strength. My king, Lord Chun, this general also heard some news. Wang Zhanjiang thought for a while and decided to tell them what he heard. Oh, what news? Zhu Huiqiu asked. Wang Zhanjiang wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He was obviously shocked by the black cavalry's killing methods. He quickly calmed himself down and said, "This general heard that the black cavalry used up 1/5 of their gunpowder." What? Hearing this, Chun Tian exclaimed. He took a step forward and asked Wang Zhanjiang, with his face almost touching, "General Wang, what did you just say? Please repeat it." Wang Zhanjiang was shocked by Chun Tian's action, but he still repeated what he said just now. Ha 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 ha. After confirming that he heard it clearly this time, Chun Tian laughed and turned to Zhu Huiqiu. He clasped his hands and said, "Congratulations, my king. This time, we are 100% sure that we can take down Yang Qindong. Even if he is not alive, he is definitely dead." Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. Zhu Huiqiu seemed to have thought of something and nodded excitedly. The black cavalry was powerful, but they only relied on their powerful firearms. Without the support of gunpowder, what was the difference between these firearms and firewood? Understood. Continue to probe. At the crucial moment, we can put on a show. As for Yang Qindong, we can just push all the blame to the Sheeping Palace. Through this test, Zhu Huichun had more confidence in his heart, and he immediately spoke of the next step of the plan. This also caused Chun Tian, who was standing at the side, to nod his head repeatedly. Then he said, "Your Majesty is wise." That was an earth-shattering flattery. It was as if at this moment they could already see Yang Qindong being heavily surrounded and at the end of his rope. Chapter 1564. In the courtyard, Beta Persei reported to Yang Qindong, especially what Ba Daojiang said just now. Then he said with a puzzled look, "Young master, why do we have to inform the enemy that we don't have enough ammunition?" Yang Qindong smiled lightly when he heard this and said, "If we don't tell the enemy, how can they jump over the wall? Young master has too many things to do, so I won't waste too much time here. The sooner they make a move, the better." Beta Persei showed an expression of understanding after hearing this, but then he said with a sad face, "But young master, we really don't have much ammunition. Everyone is riding on war horses, and their equipment is already very heavy. We really can't bring too much gunpowder." "It's okay. The gunpowder has been sent over. It's in the row of houses in the backyard. It's enough for you to kill tens of thousands of people." Ha ha! Yang Qindong was in a very good mood at this moment. He had done what he needed to do now. He was just waiting for the other party to lose their patience and finally come knocking on his door. Then he could take advantage of the situation and launch the final counterattack. He believed that this would not take too long. Beta Persei had already disappeared by this time. Needless to say, he went to the backyard to check on the firearms and ammunition. When he saw the house that was thousands of square meters full of all kinds of weapons and ammunition, his mouth opened so wide that he could easily stuff an egg into it. After a while, Beta Persei couldn't help but say to himself, "Who sent this? How did it get here? Why didn't the black cavalry notice it at all? Fortunately, it's an ally. If it was an enemy, wouldn't it be too scary?" Beta Persei, who had enough ammunition, was naturally not afraid. Thinking back to the time when the 2,000 black cavalry had enough ammunition, even the 100,000 Ming Liaodong iron cavalry could be dealt with. Although they only had 500 people now, it would not be a problem for them to eliminate tens of thousands of soldiers from the 3 provinces. How would Zhu Huili know about this? After a discussion with Qin Tian and Wang Zhanjiang, he only needed to wait for the next night to arrive. He would then make his move and exhaust the enemy's ammunition until an opportunity presented itself. He would then go straight for the middle of the army and capture Yang Qindong alive. Just as Yang Qindong thought, Zhu Huichun would not wait for too long. He wanted to catch Yang Qindong too much. He wanted to prove himself too much. He wanted to become a true king or even an emperor. The night passed, and the next morning, the black cavalry began to change shifts. Those on duty went to sleep, while the black cavalry who had enough sleep got up and took over the defense work. However, before his opponent arrived, Dong Chuanfu was the first to come. He stood respectfully outside the small courtyard, and after announcing his name, he stood there obediently and waited to be received. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that every day felt like a year. Every day, he and the other members of the diplomatic mission passed in fear. No one knew when the 3 provincial kings would be in a bad mood and suddenly surround them and kill them. Fortunately, no killing intent appeared, and they finally persevered until Yang Qindong arrived. Dong Chuanfu could be considered to have completed his mission, and before he left, he had to come and see the king. This was his duty as a subject. Yang Qindong slept well in the second half of the night, but Beta Persei was a little excited and had a pair of panda eyes. Ba Daojiang walked into the courtyard and reported that Dong Chuanfu had asked for an audience outside the door. After hearing this, Yang Qindong nodded and said, "Then let him in." After a while, Dong Chuanfu, who was dressed in a Chinese tunic suit, came in front of Yang Qindong. He then knelt down and greeted him, respectfully calling him Your Majesty and greeting him well. "Get up." Letting Dong Chuanfu kneel on the ground, Yang Qindong didn't stop him. He knew that these people who used to be officials in the great Ming dynasty attached great importance to etiquette. If he dared not to let him kneel, he would inevitably be nagged and his ears would suffer. "How is it? Have you gained anything during this time?" With a slight smile on his face, Yang Qindong said with a pleasant expression, "Although these people have made inappropriate remarks, Yang Wu reported in the telegram that these people are still very honest and competent for the work in hand. It's just that their thinking is somewhat traditional. If it wasn't for the fact that he was upright, how could he have become a vice minister? How could Yang Qindong tolerate them until now? Of course, Dong Chuanfu was found by Yu Qian. Needless to say, people who can be recognized by this person are not worried about their standing. When asked what he had learned, Dong Chuanfu, who had just stood up, sighed and said, "Your Majesty, this king of the 3 provinces is really too hateful. Ever since we came here, we have never seen him. Not only does he put on a high and mighty appearance, but he also frequently makes the soldiers guarding us make frightening movements. He is really hateful. It's also thanks to Your Majesty's wisdom that we can suppress him and make him obediently surrender to us." Even at this time, Dong Chuanfu was still kind enough to think that Yang Qindong's arrival was really to accept Zhu Huihua's surrender. Regarding this, Yang Qindong didn't mean to explain. He didn't want to show off his greatness in front of his officials, as if his appearance saved these people. Although this was the truth, but even without these people, in the face of righteousness, Yang Qindong was skilled and bold, and would still make this trip. He also didn't want to say that the reason why Zhu Huihua let Dong Chuanfu and the others go was because they were useless, and letting them go could also show his benevolence and make him famous. Well, this time when you go back, work hard. You also need to know that in this world, the so-called justice is just in the end whose fist is bigger. Otherwise, the weak will not have any right to speak and receive any respect. If you have time, you can tell your colleagues about your experience. Perhaps a country can be ruled by law, by etiquette, and by virtue. But a country must be founded with one's fist. This is a principle that hasn't been repeated for thousands of years. Sometimes killing people is also to save more people. Understand? It was rare for Yang Qindong to say so much at once. Dong Chuanfu remembered it all in his heart and quickly bowed his head and said, "I will remember your Majesty's teachings." "Good, go back. Leave in the morning, there's no need to stay." After Yang Qindong gave Dong Chuanfu one last warning, he waved his hand, and Dao Jiang walked up and led him away. Yang Qindong slowly closed his eyes and thought about the current situation. There were only 3 reasons why Zhu Huihua didn't kill Dong Chuanfu and the others. First, it was disdain. After all, with a big fish like him around, everyone else could be ignored. Second, it was to confuse him and make him feel that the other party was really unwell, which was why they didn't come to negotiate. Then, if he was careless, it would be time for the other party to bare his fangs. Third, it was to make a name for himself. However, that was because he could kill him. If he couldn't do that, then the third reason was useless. Fine, Zhu Huihua, continue acting. Let's see if you can swallow me this time, or if I can become Sun Wukong and wreak havoc in Princess Iron Fan's stomach and win in the end. The day passed uneventfully. Only in the morning did Chun Tian come over. Other than asking Yang Qindong how he slept last night, he also reported that Dong Chuanfu and the others had left the city. At the same time, he also said that their king, Zhu Huihua's health had improved a little, but it would take a few more days for him to fully recover. He asked Yang Qindong to be understanding and wait patiently, who didn't know how to act. Yang Qindong reprimanded Chun Tian in front of him, saying that the killers that appeared last night had a lot to do with the lack of protection from the 3 provinces. Then, he said that he was busy with official business and couldn't wait here for more than a few days. If Zhu Huichun still couldn't come to see him in 3 days at most, he would leave. At that time, he would bring the steel cavalry. Hearing Yang Qindong give a deadline of 3 days, Chun Tian was happy, but he pretended to be serious and said, "Yes, please rest assured, Bugnam of Gojoseon. In 3 days, my king's health should be able to hold on until he comes to see you. As for what happened last night, they have already investigated. It was done by Shiping Wang's Mu family. It should be the Southern Ming court's intention." He also said that since the other side didn't succeed, they won't let it go. They might continue to attack, but he will tell the guards outside to strengthen their defenses. Is he trying to give me a heads up? Yang Qindong thought in his heart, but he didn't say anything. This was the game. There were all kinds of tricks, and there was nothing to object to. If Yang Qindong didn't need to do this to obtain the righteous cause and take control of the 3 provinces, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. However, the 3 provinces were Han territory, and there were Han people here. If he didn't want the people to suffer too much, it was inevitable that he had to play some tricks. Chun Tian left, but when he returned, he reported the information to Zhu Huiyun. The 2 discussed that they had to use up all the firearms and ammunition brought by the Black Cavalry in 3 nights. If they couldn't do it in 3 nights, they would turn hostile on the 4th day. In short, they couldn't let Yang Qindong escape. Even if they couldn't capture him alive, they had to kill him and leave behind a corpse. Passively taking a beating wasn't Yang Qindong's personality. He was surrounded by Wang Zhanjiang's army in the small courtyard and couldn't get out, but he had a radio. He used the radio to broadcast what happened last night to the head of the security bureau, Yang San, who had arrived at Yunnan Manor earlier. Yes, this time, Yang San was also ordered to rush to Yunnan Manor. His main task was to investigate which traitor colluded with the 3 provinces' kings and sold out Yang Xie and the 5-star army. In the past few years, Yang San's activities were mostly in the Baiming area. Although Yang Xie didn't have the intention to use force there were too many young masters' relatives in the capital of Baiming. Not to mention others, Yang Qindong's brothers and sisters were all here. Chapter 1565. Ever since Yang Qindong had left Baiming's capital and headed south, his relatives in the capital had been treated like an otherworldly existence. Even though the Baiming emperor and a few important officials loathed them, they didn't dare to do anything. This situation was very strange and complicated. Yang Qindong wouldn't be at ease if he sent someone else. Therefore, he handed the matter of the southern Ming to Yang Lu and the matter of the northern Ming to Yang San. Over the years, Yang San had done a very good job. Under the watchful eyes of others, the Yang clan's relatives hadn't been attacked by any external forces. But at the beginning of this year, Yang Qindong's eldest sister, Yang Fei, had passed away due to illness at the age of 59. In that era, living to 60 was already considered a long life. This was something that no one could resist. But because Yang Qindong was busy and couldn't personally go due to special circumstances, he left everything to Yang San. He took care of it. As soon as the funeral was over, Yang San received a new order. Without stopping, he rushed to the 3 provinces and secretly entered the southern Cloud Manor. With the capabilities of the security bureau, he naturally had a special way to enter the city without being discovered by Zhu Huichuan's spies. This order was passed down by Yang Qindong to Yang San, asking him to spread the news in the city. Last night, someone wanted to harm him and spread Qin Tian's words. Furthermore, he emphasized that he had to spread the news to the commoners and let them know that if anything happened to him here, the 5-star army would definitely be enraged and would flatten this place. At that time, the first ones to suffer would definitely be the commoners at the lowest level. This was why Yang Qindong was willing to be bait. How to guide the public opinion, how to make the public opinion work for him, how to use the public opinion to achieve his goals, and so on. As a person of the future, he was very clear about this. Don't underestimate the public opinion. If things were done well, it could hold up against hundreds of thousands of soldiers. After sending out the telegram, Yang San didn't disappoint. Not long after, rumors began to appear in Yunnan Manor, spreading to the restaurants and markets where people gathered. Some of the citizens had also heard about the gunshots that were heard in the city last night. At first, they didn't know what this meant, but after hearing those rumors, they suddenly realized that someone was trying to harm Bugnam of Gojoseon. As the rumors spread more and more, all kinds of unfavorable news began to spread among the people. After 4 hours of fermenting, the public opinion was boiling in the afternoon, and the news had spread to the extent that everyone in the streets and alleys knew about it. Have you heard? Last night, there were assassins who rushed into the courtyard where Bugnam of Gojoseon lived. Just the sound of gunfire alone has been ringing for a long time. Why haven't I heard about it? Everyone knows about it now. Hey, who do you think is so daring? Guns are so powerful. Aren't we just going to die? Come on, what do you care about? Did you not consider what would happen if the assassins hurt Bugnam of Gojoseon? What would happen? This sentence attracted the attention of many people in the tea house. Think about it. If something happened to Bugnam of Gojoseon in our Yunnan Manor, wouldn't his brave subordinates seek revenge? If that's the case, who will be the unlucky one in the end? After about a few breaths. Someone seemed to have reacted. If something happened to Bugnam of Gojosian in our place, I'm afraid that the 5-star army will definitely trample our Yunnan manor to avenge their king. Then won't we, the citizens, suffer? More than suffering. I'm afraid we won't be able to survive. Hiss. What followed was the sound of people inhaling cold air. This probably won't happen. We all know this. How can the 3 kings not know this? He will definitely send people to protect Bugnam of Gojosian. There were still people in the crowd who were hoping for a fluke and said, "Protect Bugnam of Gojosian? I'm afraid you still don't know. Ever since Bugnam of Gojosian came to our Yunnan manor yesterday, the 3 kings claimed to be sick and didn't come to see him. Who knows what he's thinking? Maybe those assassins were sent by the 3 kings. Silence, silence. How can you talk about these things? Maybe the 3 kings are really sick." Some people didn't agree with this point of view and took the initiative to explain for Zhu Huichun. Really sick? If that's the case, then it's good. I'm afraid that they have ulterior motives. Sigh, if that's the case, then what should we do? Then why don't we go and protect Bugnam of Gojosian, or persuade him to leave? Anyway, he can't be hurt here. Who said no? I thought that the 3 kings were clear. After Bugnam of Gojosian came, we, the citizens, would be at peace. Who would have thought that things would turn out like this? Sigh, isn't this going back on their word? Under the guidance of a few Yangtze's intelligence personnel, the public opinion began to develop in a direction that was favorable to Yang Qindong and unfavorable to Zhu Huichun. As more and more people discussed, the citizens in the tea house gathered around. Later, it was unknown who suggested it, but in the end, this was the result. First, everyone split up and went to the 3 kings' mansions to petition them. They asked the 3 kings to meet with Bugnam of Gojosian to discuss the peace talks. Second, the rest of the people went to the courtyard where Bugnam of Gojosian lived. Everyone was to protect him on their own. In short, before the matter was clarified, nothing could happen to Yang Qindong. Otherwise, they would be the ones in trouble. After the discussion came to a conclusion, the citizens in the tea house quickly dispersed. Everyone began to contact people. For matters that concerned the life and death of their own family, no one would ignore it, and no one would be indifferent. The streets of Southern Cloud Manor became lively after this discussion was spread out. Many commoners began to gather. A portion of them headed straight for the 3 provincial princes' residences. A portion of them headed straight for the small courtyard where Yang Qindong lived with sticks and iron weapons. The appearance of one citizen naturally did not attract the attention of the 3 provinces' army. It was the same even if there were 10 or 100 of them. However, when the number of people increased to the point that there were thousands of them, even the army felt afraid. Is this a mass uprising? When he learned that there were more than 5,000 citizens with all kinds of weapons coming in the direction of the courtyard, General Wang Zhanjiang, who was guarding there, was puzzled. He did not know why such a thing happened. Could it be that the citizens wanted to take Bugnam of Gojosian's life? When this idea appeared, Wang Zhanjiang felt that it was an opportunity. If Yang Qindong died in the hands of the citizens, then it had nothing to do with him. He could also complete the task given by the king. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? At that moment, Wang Zhanjiang ordered the soldiers guarding outside not to put up much resistance. They only needed to put up a symbolic resistance to the commoners. If they really wanted to rush into the small courtyard, then they could do as they wished. Anyway, these citizens were spontaneous and not organized by him. If something really happened, it would have nothing to do with him. Without anyone stopping them, the citizens easily arrived outside the courtyard. Then, under Wang Zhanjiang's stupefied gaze, these people surrounded the 6 doors of the small courtyard and sat down on the ground. From the looks of it was clear that they were not going to leave. At this moment, Wang Zhanjiang could tell that these people were not here to cause trouble for Yang Qindong. They were clearly here to protect this person. When he thought that with the presence of these citizens, tonight's operation would not be able to proceed normally, cold sweat broke out on Wang Zhanjiang's forehead. Men, chase these citizens out. Quickly chase them away. When the soldiers of the 3 provinces who were originally standing around and watching heard the generals shout, they all walked forward reluctantly. However, how could it be so easy for 1,000 soldiers to chase away 5,000 citizens? The outside of the courtyard was very lively. The commotion quickly attracted the attention of the black cavalry in the courtyard. Commander Dao Xiao, who was in charge of the day shift, immediately sent people out to understand the situation. After knowing the general cause of the matter, he reported it to Yang Qindong in the main courtyard, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The citizens want to help us guard the courtyard. This is a good thing. This proves that the young master has the support of the citizens. The straightforward beta Persei was elated when he heard this and bared his teeth. Yang Qindong, who had closed the book in his hand, also had a warm smile on his face. He could not help but sigh in his heart. This was the power of the citizens. Although they usually did not show their strength when it came to their interests or even life and death, they would erupt with a powerful force. Wasn't the reason why the great Ming dynasty was destroyed in history because of the various uprisings of the citizens? First, the country was in chaos, and this gave the slaves an opportunity to take advantage of it. At this moment, he showed some interest. He wanted to see what these citizens would do. Outside the courtyard, the soldiers and the citizens were confronting each other. Because of the difference in numbers, the soldiers of the 3 provinces did not have any advantage. Although they all had standard swords in their hands, they did not dare to casually kill the citizens. What if they angered the citizens and caused a mutiny? What's more, the soldiers were originally made up of commoners, and some of them were originally from the southern Cloud Manor. His friends and relatives were among these 5,000 people. So how could they bear to kill them? In the chaos, the situation was already out of control. Wang Zhanjiang had no choice but to retreat and go straight to the 3 provincial palaces to ask for reinforcements. At this time, the 3 provincial palaces were also not peaceful. Thousands of citizens were gathered outside, shouting loudly. They wanted the 3 provincial kings to see Bugnam of Gojoseon and discuss the peace talks together. Bugnam of Gojoseon is already here. Now is the time for us to show our sincerity. We can't go back on our words. That's right. A person must be honest. He came to our territory without worry. We can't treat Bugnam of Gojoseon like this. Willing to invite the 3 provincial kings to go to the peace talks. Willing to invite the 3 provincial kings to go to the peace talks. Chapter 1566. More and more voices rang out, and finally they converged into one sentence. Outside the mansion, the shouts grew louder and louder. Inside the mansion, Zhu Huiqiu's expression was very ugly. He couldn't understand why the situation had suddenly changed. What had happened? Chun Tian had been urgently summoned from the backyard of the mansion. When he heard the shouts outside, he said nervously, "Your Majesty, this matter must be suppressed. We can't agree to the people's demands." Zhu Huiqiu rolled his eyes at Chun Tian. Isn't this nonsense? It wasn't easy to trick Yang Qindong into coming here. How could he be satisfied if he didn't teach him a lesson? That's enough, Qinggong. Let's talk about what we should do now. Okay. Chun Tian fell into deep thought, but as expected of Zhu Huiqiu's think tank, he quickly raised his head again. Your Majesty, we can only stall for time now. At the same time, we have to act quickly. Chun Tian took a step forward and reported his idea to Zhu Huiqiu in a low voice. Zhu Huiqiu kept nodding as he listened. Finally, he waved his arm and said, "That's right. Let's do it this way. But it's a pity. I'm afraid it will be difficult to capture Yang Chendong alive and use him for our own purposes. Your Majesty, don't worry. When the time is right, I will have a good talk with Bugnam of Gojoseon. I don't think anyone is willing to die. Maybe there's still a chance. I hope so. Chen Gonggong, I'll leave this matter to you. Go ahead and do it." Zhu Huiqiu waved his hand and sighed. After watching Chen Tian leave, he thought for a moment and went straight to the backyard of the mansion. In the backyard, Emo Gui was sitting in front of the pond. He seemed to know that Zhu Huiqiu was coming. There were 2 teacups in front of him, and the tea was still steaming. "King of the 3 provinces, please take a seat." Emo Gui modestly invited Zhu Huiqiu to take a seat in front of him. Zhu Huiyan admired Emo Gui's calmness very much. His originally restless heart seemed to have calmed down at this moment. "Mr. Emo, I'm actually here to ask for your advice. In your opinion, how do you think we should resolve the current situation?" Emo Gui wasn't surprised by Zhu Huichuan's answer. After a sigh, he said, "Your Highness, as I said before, my master's intention is to wait for Yang Chendong to enter the courtyard before making a move. After all, there are only 500 people. As long as we do our best and don't fear losses, the victory will be ours. To deal with Yang Chendong, either you don't make a move or you have to go all out. You can't have the slightest bit of wishful thinking, and you can't even try to probe him." Seeing that Emo Huiguan was about to go on, Zhu Huichen quickly interrupted him. "Mr. Emo, let's not talk about what happened before. Let's talk about what to do next. I really didn't expect this Bugnam of Gojoseon to know how to threaten the people's will. Now, this prince has a headache. Haha, it doesn't matter. We just have to make a move later. I just don't know if your Highness is ready to make a move now." Emo Gui said the word yes in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. "Of course we have to make a move. I've already discussed it with Mr. Chen. We'll do our best tonight. We have to take down Bugnam of Gojoseon, dead or alive." Zhu Huichun told Emo Gui about Qin Tian's idea. "Good. Since your Highness has made up your mind, don't worry about it. If anything happens, my master won't just stand by and watch. My master has prepared a backup plan. Yang Chendong must die." Emo Gui's face was full of murderous intent as he said this. This was the final mission his master gave him. If he didn't complete it, well, his head would roll. In comparison, he certainly hoped that Yang Chendong would die, not him. When Zhu Huichun heard Emo Gui say that he had a backup plan, he felt good. This was the result he wanted. Now that he had achieved his goal, he nodded with satisfaction. "Good. I'll have to trouble Mr. Emo. Of course, if you need my help in any way, just let me know." Ha ha ha. The change in public opinion made Zhu Huichuan's 3-day attack turn into a 1-day attack. He was going to see the results tonight. For this, Wang Zhanjiang received a large number of reinforcements. A total of 4,000 soldiers rushed out of the courtyard. 5,000 soldiers fought against 5,000 civilians and chased away the stick-wielding civilians. When the commoners saw so many soldiers from the 3 provinces outside the small courtyard, their anxious hearts relaxed. With so many soldiers protecting Bugnam of Gojoseon, their safety shouldn't be a problem. They scattered in all directions. However, when Yang Chendong, who was in the courtyard, learned about the situation outside, his expression became much more dignified. He had a feeling that it was time for the dagger to be revealed. "Beta Persei, take out all the weapons and ammunition of the Black Cavalry and equip them." "Young master, are they going to make a move?" Beta Persei asked cautiously. Maybe, maybe not. But it's not wrong to be prepared. Go do it. Yang Qindong waved his hand, then returned to his desk and began to draft a telegram. Once Zhu Huichun turned hostile, he would have to send the main force of the five-star army to the 3 provinces. At that time, he would have the right to do so. This time, the other party didn't want to give him face. Presumably, once the news spread, the civilians would understand his decision to send troops, and there would be less resistance. It had to be said that for the safety of the 3 provinces, Yang Qindong did a lot and was willing to take this risk. This was completely in line with his goal of bringing the Han people to the top of the world. 5,000 against 500. This was the first dish that Zhu Huichun prepared for Yang Qindong. If things didn't go well, he would continue to deploy troops. Speaking of which, in Yunnan Prefecture, he had 50,000 troops stationed there. He didn't believe that he couldn't kill Yang Qindong with 100 times the force. In a courtyard 2 alleys away from Yang Qindong's courtyard, 200 strong warriors were sharpening their swords. If Zhu Huichun could see them, he would recognize that the leader was Mu Ong from the Mu family of the Shiping King. Mu Ong, the nephew of the current Shiping King, Mu Bin, was the bravest person in the younger generation of the Mu family. Even Mu Bin's eldest son, Mu Tsong, couldn't compare to him. It was because of his bravery that he was given the task of assassinating Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong's existence was a great threat to the great Ming dynasty's political power. It could be said that as long as this person didn't die, it was only a matter of time before he replaced the great Ming dynasty's political power. Because of this, after hearing that Yang Qindong had entered Yunnan Prefecture with only 500 black cavalry, Mu Ong was immediately sent out. The purpose was to complete the task of assassinating Bugnam of Gojoseon. This was a risky move, but when Mu Bin, the king of Shiping, found Mu Ong, he brought his 200 men of sacrifice to Yunnan Prefecture without saying a word and successfully went into hiding. As a member of the Mu family, they were very familiar with Yunnan Prefecture. These 200 men of sacrifice were deeply indebted to the Mu family, so they came with the intention of returning the favor. To put it bluntly, they didn't plan to return alive. The small courtyard was silent, showing the excellent quality of the men of sacrifice. In the corner, Mu Bin was talking in a low voice with the leader of the men of sacrifice. The general idea was that there was a new movement on Zhu Huiyun's side. It seemed that he was going to make a move on Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong tonight. Well, keep an eye on them. It's fine if they succeed. If they don't succeed, it'll be our turn to attack. In short, Yang Qindong must die. Mu Eng's face was unusually firm, holding the idea of success or death. The Mu family was indebted to the Zhu family and guarded Nanjiang for the great Ming dynasty. Everything changed because of the appearance of Yang Qindong. Now, not only did they lose their foundation in Yunnan, but they were also hiding in a small place like Kelisai, not daring to show their faces. Gradually, the name of the Mu family was forgotten by the world. This was something that Mu Ong didn't want to face. Just when the Mu family was feeling helpless, they learned that Yang Qindong had entered Yunnan Prefecture to negotiate with Zhu Huiyun, the king of 3 provinces. They were like people who were groping in the dark, suddenly seeing the sun, suddenly giving birth to new hope. In other words, if Yang Qindong died, the Mu family had to live. Otherwise, they would die without a doubt. Once the king of 3 provinces was defeated by Yang Qindong, the Mu family would have no soil to live on. Even if they died, they would have no face to see their ancestors. For the sake of the entire Mu family, it was just sacrificing these 200 men of sacrifice and Mu Ong. What was the big deal? Mu Ong made up his mind at this moment. However, what he didn't know was that in a small courtyard in the southern Cloud Manor, there was a group of men in black who were also preparing to fight to the death. They were relatively short, but their murderous aura didn't diminish. They were faintly discernible in the darkness. Yang Qindong didn't know that there was more than one enemy, but he was definitely not afraid. In his goal of achieving the great Han people's revival, he was destined to walk on an unusual path and was destined to be full of danger. Beta Persei had already taken out firearms and ammunition with Dao Xiao and Ba Daojiang and equipped themselves. Not only that, they also took out all the things that could be used and built several blockades. With Yang Qindong's courtyard as the center, they built an arch-shaped temporary trench. Although they couldn't exert their full combat power due to the limitations of the environment and tools, as long as the other party didn't have artillery, it would be difficult to break through their defense line. Tell the soldiers to put on all their equipment. They must protect their own safety. Young Master said that it's fine if the army of 3 provinces doesn't attack, but if they do, they will use all their strength. Our opponents are 10 times, 100 times, or even more enemies. Beta Persei faced a group of black cavalry squad captains and said this with a serious expression. Chapter 1567. Beta Persei couldn't understand why the young master didn't allow them to take the initiative to attack. The situation was obviously very dangerous, and Zhu Huihua's ambitions were completely exposed. What they should do now was to take advantage of the fact that it wasn't dark and suddenly kill their way out. This way, they could catch the other party off guard. Coupled with the undercover intelligence agents in the city, the chances of them leaving the city would be greatly increased. In the eyes of Beta Persei and the other black cavalry, Yang Qindong's safety was naturally the first priority. In order to complete this mission, everyone was willing to sacrifice themselves. They really couldn't figure out why Yang Qindong still hadn't made such a decision, but they didn't know that Yang Qindong had his own reasons for doing so. He wanted to take this opportunity to find out who the traitor was. Ever since he found out about the traitor, Yang Qindong felt like he was sitting on a needle. The feeling that someone could harm him anytime and anywhere made him feel very uncomfortable. In order to solve this problem, Yang Qindong risked his life to come to Yunnan Manor. He didn't believe that the traitor would still hide and not make a move under such an opportunity. As long as the traitor made a move, Yang Sen might discover something. Once he discovered the traitor, it would be the time for the real acquisition. Only then would the risk be worth it, taking advantage of this opportunity to let the traitor jump out and then catch them all in one fell swoop was another main purpose of Yang Qindong's trip. As for whether the black cavalry would be in danger by doing this with the firearms and ammunition he took out from the warehouse, it shouldn't be too big of a problem even if there was a problem. In order to completely eliminate the hidden danger, this risk was worth taking. Once Zhu Huihuo brazenly started to make a move, the nearby 5-star army would gather together. At that time, the 500 black cavalry dragon guards would only need to hold on for 3 days, and the main army would arrive. The danger would also be resolved. These 3 days were the opportunity for the traitor to make a move. He also believed that it would be difficult for the traitor to hold back. After all, it was such a good opportunity. If he didn't make a move, it would be hard to say whether there would be such a chance next time. Sitting in the main hall of the main room, Yang Qindong had already asked Wang Shan to send a telegram to Yang San, asking him to keep a close eye on every move of the 3 provinces, regardless of who they contacted. Or if someone contacted them on their own initiative, they had to follow this clue and investigate it thoroughly. In short, they had to take this opportunity to find the traitor. The black cavalry began to make various preparations, and the sky gradually darkened. Finally, the sky turned completely dark, and the sound of the night watch rang out. About 10 miles into the night, there was finally some movement outside the courtyard. The sound of a large number of footsteps could be heard. Everyone get ready. Let's give them a taste of grenades first. The person in charge of the first line of defense was Ba Daojiang, the vice captain of the Black Cavalry's 1st Battalion. Beta Persei had already informed him that 5 of the 6 gates in the 2 courtyards had been firmly nailed from the inside. In order to prevent the enemy from climbing over the walls, they had buried landmines on the ground of the walls to ensure that no matter how many enemies came, they would all die. This was the only gate in the 6 gates that could be entered at any time. Ba Daojiang was guarding this gate. There were already several light and heavy machine guns set up here, forming a powerful firepower net to ensure that no one could pass through the net and rush in. A full 4 days of dry food and water had also been prepared. As soon as the battle started, the telegraph office would send out a request for help. Then, 3 days later, the main force of the 5-star army would arrive outside Yunnan Mansion. At that time, the situation would be settled. Within these 3 days, Yang Qindong's safety would be completely handed over to the 500 Black Cavalry. Everyone was both excited and worried about this sacred mission. They were excited that such a great mission was handed over to them. After completing the mission, this would be the most exciting experience of their lives. They were worried that if the enemy rushed in and hurt the 6th young master, even if it was just a hair, they would not be able to atone for it, even if they died 100 times. We must not let the 6th young master suffer even the slightest bit of harm. This was the common thought of the 500 Black Cavalry. In order to achieve this goal, everyone took out 100% of their spirit, loaded their guns, and aimed at the enemy. The sound of footsteps was getting closer and closer. It seemed that the 3 provincial armies were gathering outside. This created a dark cloud over the people's heads. If it was an ordinary army, they would have been so nervous that they would be sweating profusely. They might even be trembling all over and unable to hold their weapons tightly. After all, they only had 500 people. The 3 provincial armies alone had more than 50,000 soldiers in Yunnan Mansion. This ratio of 1 to 100 sounded really scary. Even if they were holding firearms that were more advanced than this era, the enemy's advantage in numbers was still like a dark cloud. It was so oppressive that it made it hard for them to breathe. However, with 500 Black Cavalry, they were much calmer. As veterans of hundreds of battles, as the Black Cavalry, who had participated in 2,000 against 100,000 and defeated the enemy without suffering any injuries, they were only excited. In their eyes, the so-called 50,000 enemies were all military exploits. Time passed by minute. The footsteps outside were getting louder and louder. As the Black Cavalry, who had rich combat experience, they could tell from the sound of the footsteps that there were at least 3,000 enemies, maybe even more. There were only about 100 soldiers who were guarding this door with Ba Daojiang. However, they were not afraid at all. This was because among the 100 soldiers, there were more than 10 light and heavy machine guns. This gave them a strong sense of confidence. Clang, 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 the sound of the door being knocked was finally heard. The wooden door, that was only rigged with a few wooden wedges, soon vibrated. At the same time, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies shouted, "Brothers inside the door, open the door quickly. There are assassins here. We need to go in and search for the assassins." Ba Daojiang scoffed at this lame excuse. He held the grenade in his hand, ready to pull the pin at any time, waiting to throw it out. After a few shouts, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies finally pushed the wooden door open. They did not expect the Black Cavalry to answer them or open the door. The shouts just now were just an excuse for them to show up. The moment the wooden door was pushed open, a black mass of figures appeared. Countless soldiers of the 3 provincial armies rushed in like a sluice gate. Throw it. Ba Daojiang did not hesitate. After shouting, he threw the grenade in his hand forward. Along with it, hundreds of other grenades were thrown forward. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of explosions rose one after another in the dark night. Under the loud explosions, there was a series of screams and screams. Type 95 open fire. As soon as the grenades exploded, Ba Daojiang gave the order. Then, a series of shots were fired in the direction of the door. Some of the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies who were rushing forward or trying to climb over the wall cried out in pain. This was just the first round of attacks, and there were probably hundreds of casualties or serious injuries. Outside the other 5 doors, there was also a series of explosions. Needless to say, someone must have stepped on a landmine and caused an explosion. This was a sign that the enemy had launched an all-out attack. After a series of gunshots, the area in front of the wooden door became much quieter. The soldiers of the 3 provincial armies quickly retreated after leaving a trail of corpses on the ground. It was obvious that they were just testing the waters. The black cavalry was the best of the best. The soldiers of the 3 provincial armies did not expect to be able to break into the courtyard in a single charge. Quick, this door is open. Everyone, gather here. A thunderous voice came from outside the courtyard. Clearly, after the other courtyards were unable to be opened, this courtyard that was the only one that was opened attracted the attention of even more people. General Wang Zhanjiang, who was in charge of the attack outside the door, began to deploy his troops and rearrange the attack plan. The sturdiness of this courtyard was not bad. Even in the face of a few explosions, it did not collapse. It had to be said that the seriousness of the people in ancient times was much better than the shoddy construction of modern times. Originally, they were worried that the wall would collapse because of the explosion. If that happened, without anything to rely on, the difficulty of defending would be several times greater. Now that he knew that the walls were fine, the commander of this battle, Yang Er, heaved a sigh of relief. Very good. Leave the rest to Ba Daojiang. We will continue to dig the tunnel. We must be quick. We don't have much time left. After speaking, Beta Persei did not care about the battle outside. He waved the military shovel and continued to rise to the ground. At this time, there was a huge pit nearly 2 meters deep on the ground, and it was still deepening. After about a quarter of an hour of rest, the soldiers of the 3 provincial armies outside the courtyard launched the second wave of attack. Compared to the last time, they had more people this time, and the momentum of the attack was more powerful. Everyone, don't be afraid. They don't have much firearms and ammunition. As long as they don't have firearms, they can't be our opponents. Charge! Wang Zhanjiang stood outside and shouted, cheering the soldiers on. Under the general's shout, a large number of figures appeared in front of the wooden door and on the wall. They were all fierce, cheering themselves on as they rushed forward to face the flying bullets. Pa pa pa, pa pa pa, gunshots rang out again, and one by one, the black figures fell on the wooden door or on the courtyard wall. The figures that were alive and kicking just now were now bloody corpses. With just one wave of attack, at least hundreds of soldiers from the 3 provincial armies died. In this regard, Wang Zhanjiang, as the commander, did not have the slightest hint of pain on his face. These were all ordinary soldiers. In the eyes of the general, their lives were as cheap as dogs. If they died, they died. As long as there was money and food, they could quickly raise a new army. Chapter 1568. Charge! Continue to charge. The enemy's firearms can't possibly have unlimited gunpowder. Charge! Charge! Wang Zhanjiang yelled at the top of his lungs as he commanded the soldiers to charge into the courtyard one after another. It was as if they would not stop until they reached their goal. The charging troops came one after another. Even though the number of corpses on the ground was increasing, it still could not stop them from charging forward. As the charging momentum became more and more ferocious, they finally relied on their advantage in numbers to charge into the courtyard. They were less than 80 feet away from the black cavalry. Machine gun team, get ready, fire in one shot. Other than occasionally shooting with the 95 style, Ba Daojiang had been observing the changes in the battle situation. Seeing that the enemy's attacks were getting more and more ferocious, he could no longer control the situation by relying on the 95 style. Hence, he gave the order to the machine gun team. The so-called fire in one shot referred to the fact that they could only fire a clip of bullets. This way, they could stabilize the situation and not waste bullets. The machine gun team members who were already itching for a fight could only watch helplessly when they saw their comrades killing the enemy to their heart's content. Now that they had finally received the order to open fire, how could they be courteous? All the light and heavy machine guns rang out, and the bullets rained down like rain. The soldiers of the 3 provinces who had barely escaped death fell to the ground one by one, da-da-da, da-da-da-da, under the sound of the machine guns. Not a single living enemy could be seen in the courtyard in less than 20 seconds. The advantage that the 3 provincial armies had gained with great difficulty was wiped out in an instant. The dense sound of machine guns also caused the 3 provincial troops who were preparing to continue their charge to slow down. Then Wang Zhanjiang yelled, "Stop charging! Stop charging!" They had no choice but to stop. Under such dense gunfire, and the terrain that was less than 50 feet wide, the number of people sent out would be the same as the number of people who died. Calculate the casualties. Wang Zhanjiang yelled loudly. Then, he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Just a moment ago, he was prepared to lead the charge in order to encourage the soldiers. After all, there were already people who had charged in. In his mind, as long as he could charge in front of the black cavalry, he would be able to utilize the advantage of cold weapons. At that time, with the advantage of superior numbers, he would be able to exhaust his opponents to death even if he had to exhaust them. However, a burst of concentrated gunfire made him think that it was a close call. At the same time, he also completely withdrew the idea of taking the lead to attack. That was a flintlock, and when it hit a person's body, a hole would appear, and a person would die. Even if a civet turned around and had 9 lives, it would still die miserably in such a situation. Even so, if he had nothing better to do, why would he lead the charge? That was not a charge, but a fight to the death. At the same time, Wang Zhanjiang couldn't figure it out. When the black cavalry entered the city, he didn't see them carrying any heavy firearms. So what was going on? Also, didn't the black cavalry have limited ammunition? But from the looks of it, how could it be limited at all? They didn't have the slightest intention of saving when fighting. He cursed in his heart. He didn't know who provided the information that the 5-star army didn't have enough ammunition and almost got him killed. He then waited for the battle damage statistics. The Kiliarchs and Centurions below played their roles and quickly reported the battle situation to him, the commander of the army. When the final statistics came out, even though Wang Zhanjiang was already prepared, he still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. 3,200 people. From the beginning to the end, not even half an hour had passed, and 3,200 soldiers had died. Among them, there were 400 soldiers who died outside the other 5 courtyards. The number of soldiers who died at the courtyard gate in front of him reached 2,700. Looking at this shocking number, Wang Zhanjiang looked back in disbelief. Only then did he realize that the originally densely packed army had been reduced by a lot. Only a little more than a third of the original 5,000 people were left. Don't charge for now, wait for orders. Wang Zhanjiang quickly made the decision to stop the charge and report the battle results. After all, if he continued to charge, he was afraid that his less than 2,000 subordinates would only be feeding bullets to the enemy. If he didn't handle it well, the black cavalry would see through him. If they counterattacked, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop them even if he wanted to. He left a few confidants and ordered them to keep an eye on the 5-star army in the courtyard. No matter what, he couldn't let them suddenly go out. He then rode on his war horse and went straight to the king's mansion. The sound of gunfire could be heard throughout the city. Zhu Huiqiu, who was in the king's mansion, was naturally no exception. At this moment, he was pacing back and forth in the main hall of the 5 prefectures. Although he hadn't received the relevant battle report yet from the dense gunfire, he had a feeling that the situation wasn't very favorable. Wang Zhanjiang came and immediately stood in front of Zhu Huiqiu and reported the battle situation. Hearing this, the expression of the 3 provincial kings changed again and again. After a while, his face darkened. You're saying that the black cavalry has enough ammunition and they don't have any intention of stopping shooting? Yes. Wang Zhanjiang lowered his head. After sensing the king's anger, he didn't even dare to raise his head. How is this possible? Zhu Huiqiu said in disbelief. After anxiously pacing back and forth a few steps, he asked loudly, "When they entered the city, didn't you all see it? Did they bring any carriages?" No. Wang Zhanjiang lowered his head and answered honestly. Since they didn't bring any carriages with them, how much ammunition could they bring with them? How is it possible that they can't finish shooting? Could it be that the soldiers below are too afraid of death and can't charge properly? Zhu Huiqiu couldn't understand and wanted to put all the blame on the soldiers' morale. No, Your Majesty, the soldiers are already putting their lives on the line. Out of the 5,000 soldiers, I have prepared a team of 500 soldiers. Once they are found to be cowardly and not daring to charge, they will be punished according to military law. Wang Zhanjiang naturally tried his best to explain. He didn't want to be punished because of this and be punished by the king. Zhu Huiqiu still trusted Wang Zhanjiang. Otherwise, he wouldn't have entrusted him with such an important task. However, it was because of this that he couldn't figure out the reason. Now that Wang Zhanjiang was standing in front of him, he suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and asked, "General Wang, why are you here?" "Your Majesty, I'm here to ask for reinforcements. I only have less than 2,000 soldiers. The 500 black cavalry should be unharmed. Under such circumstances, we don't have the ability to launch an attack. So, approved. Take this king's tiger tally, and I'll give you 10,000 soldiers. General Wang, everything depends on you. Capture Yang Qindong alive, and you will be the greatest contributor. You understand?" Zhu Huiqiu didn't wait for Wang Zhanjiang to finish speaking and nodded in agreement. In order to capture Yang Qindong alive, it would be worth it even if he had to use all 50,000 soldiers in the city. Hearing that there were 10,000 reinforcements, Wang Zhanjiang was naturally overjoyed. He immediately said with a solemn expression, "Thank you for your support, Your Majesty." "Don't worry, Your Majesty. With these 10,000 soldiers, I'm 80% more confident that we can capture Yang Qindong alive. Then this prince will wait for the good news from General Wang." "Oh, right. Remember, you must stop the attack after daybreak." Zhu Huiqiu reminded him. The situation in the city wasn't very stable. When they attacked in the dark, the civilians couldn't see what was going on. They could only be suspicious, which was easy to deal with. However, once they attacked in the day, who knew what the civilians would do? The situation hadn't reached the most critical point yet, so there was no need to take the risk of attacking in the day. Wang Zhanjiang quickly nodded in agreement. He naturally understood this logic. During the day, he was the one who had led the soldiers to persuade the 5,000 civilians to return. How could he not know that if they attacked in the day and the civilians reacted, wouldn't the situation become even more chaotic? Wang Zhanjiang took the Tiger Troop talisman and left. 2 hours later, at midnight, he brought 10,000 soldiers to the courtyard. With the arrival of so many soldiers, the streets near the courtyard were quickly filled with soldiers. With so many reinforcements in hand, Wang Zhanjiang's confidence was greatly boosted. With a wave of his hand, he sent out 2,000 soldiers and once again launched a fierce attack on the courtyard. Gunshots sounded once again, from sporadic to concentrated, indicating the intensity of the battle. A few hundred steps away in the courtyard, Yang Qindong wasn't sleeping. Instead, he stood in the courtyard and looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. It was the 14th day of the lunar calendar. The moon in the sky was very bright, but Yang Qindong's heart was a little heavy. The moment Zhu Huiqiu began to turn hostile, Wang Shan had already sent a message to the main force of the 5-star army waiting in Langsun. Presumably, they had already set off. A total of more than 200,000 soldiers should have already entered the 3 provinces. With the speed of the 1st Cavalry Army and the New Army's cavalry, they should be able to reach Yunnan Manor in 3 days. At that time, there would be a lot of fighting and killing. When he thought about how many Han people would die in this battle, Yang Qindong's mood was not good. The reason why Yang Qindong had conquered the surrounding areas of the Great Ming dynasty was because he wanted to take over this place with the smallest price. After all, the people who had lived here for generations were all Han people. The death of any one of them would be a loss to the Han people. If he wanted to bring the Han people to the peak of the world, he needed to have a certain proportion of Han people. Only then would he be considered the king of the world. Originally, he thought that after conquering the surrounding areas and showing enough strength, the Great Ming dynasty would be afraid of him. At that time, he would only need to pay a small price to peacefully take over this place, allowing more Han people to live better lives and obtain the greatest respect. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.